First, thank you and good afternoon. Great to be here, as I said, and it's an opportunity today for this Senate Committee on Indian Affairs session, an open forum on rural food security and village viability issues, an important issue and topic for all of us, and that's why I know you're here today. We're talking about lifestyle and a culture and a way of life, a respect for those that takes a new way of looking at the world, particularly consumers and Western culture. Since 2010, I've hosted various listening sessions across the state to hear directly from subsistence users, and I've tried to bring focus to this issue. And you'll hear me substitute lots of times subsistence for food security, because that's what it is. And so when you hear me say food security, it is subsistence. And I think it's important that we recognize that. As a member of the U.S. Senate representing Alaskans, I have worked to bring attention to a variety of issues on Alaska Native villages, and I have listened to many proposals for local solutions. There are many sides to the issues that are intertwined and must be given full attention with widespread support to ensure rural food security for our villages viable for another 10,000 years. As a member of the Democratic leadership, chair of the Commerce Committee on Oceans Subcommittee, and now a new member of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, these are positions that I have strategically sought out to bring these issues and important issues to the surface in Alaska and in Washington, and to bring energy and passion to the debate and the search for new solutions. My goal here today is to understand and help others understand all this and how it is intertwined. Food security, strengthening local economies, creating a balanced ecosystem, restoring healthy and vibrant communities, it all ties together. No single issue is separate. And we must work to protect Alaska as a unique population, so-called difference between the folks that have been here for 10,000 years and the so-called founders of Alaska, the newer people. Striking a balance, reframing the issues, bringing in new support is all necessary if we are going to be successful to bring about policy change on a national level. In June, I introduced, and you heard me talk about this yesterday, Traditional Foods Nourishment Act, which would allow for food service programs in schools and hospitals and elder care facilities to serve traditional foods and accept donations. We did have a companion bill introduced by Senator or Congressman Young, and we know on the House side Farm Bill now has this inserted in there. We're hopeful that the Farm Bill, which is being negotiated now, will continue to include this as we move forward, which to me is a very important issue. I will say, as I did yesterday, I've been to many federal facilities, and I do see at times traditional foods being served, which are probably breaking a few rules, but I will hope I can Senator Murkowski and I will look down and not pay attention to that. But we do want to get this fixed and rectified. In August, I hosted Senate Committee on Indian Affairs Chairwoman Marie Camwell in Washington State to show her firsthand food security struggles facing village residents along the Yukon River. Senator Campbell heard from families at a fish camp that she had never been to before, facing uncertainties not so different from tribes in other regions of the country. For years, the Northwest Indians have called for treaty rights to be honored and re-examined, and have worked alongside Alaska Native leaders in their plight. Today, I'm extremely pleased to have Senator Campbell's staff director, Mary Pavel, and she is, I don't know where she, Agatha was blocking you. We thank you for being here, an incredible advocate for her own tribe, but also now working on the Indian Affairs Committee, so we're very fortunate to have her here, to be part of this hearing and to move forward. Mary has made 2 trips to Alaska this fall and works hard with us on issues important to Alaska and Indian country. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this today. The first half of this session, we'll hear from 7 Native panelists who have various messages to share on this topic. Then we'll move to an open forum to hear from those of you who may have examples on where local solutions have made progress, or to identify new ideas that can build on the groundswell that is occurring now in Native communities to shape policy changes in the future. If we look to Alaska Native leaders and elders who possess the knowledge passed down through culture and tradition, there is much to learn about effective management of these food resources. The Alaska Native population suffers under some of the highest prices of food and energy in the nation, and access to subsistence hunting and fishing allow some relief to this. Although I support smart, responsible development projects to meet Alaska's growing needs and energy needs, there are ways to meet these needs that work with, not against, preserving the Alaskan native way of life. You'll continue to find me a strong, and I know Senator Murkowski, a leader on subsistence issues. It's an honor truly to be here, to have this hearing, have this discussion, and it's important to hear from you. And I want to say, I understand that earlier this week I missed out on the Hunt, Fish, Share rally in concert. There's definitely a groundswell occurring now that we're trying to build on as additional momentum. I've heard your voices loud and clear, and today is an opportunity to hear those again. And just so you know, a little logistics before I have Senator Murkowski make her comments is, for us here in Alaska, to hear from you, you probably say to yourself, but you hear from us all the time. That is true. But it's important to hear again so we can also take this message back to Washington on a regular basis. Today, this is being recorded and being part of the record so we can ensure that our colleagues understand some of the issues we face here in Alaska. But also important to note that since I've been elected in 2008, really sworn in 2009, 35 new senators have come into the U.S. Senate, a significant amount. That means we spend a lot of work continuing to educate on the many issues we face. So today is another opportunity to do that. So when we finish with the panel, then we'll ask people to come forward. I'd ask you to think about what are those things that are working, what are those things that are not working, what new ideas that might be out there, what local ideas might be available out there to deal with food security and subsistence. And that's what we're hopeful today to hear and get, so we can take to Washington. Let me now introduce Senator Murkowski, who also sits on a variety of committees, but specifically the Indian Affairs Committee, and we're just honored to have her participating today. And again, I can tell you on a lot of these issues, as we mentioned on the traditional foods, on subsistence, and many Alaska issues, the delegation, both on the Senate and the House, are very aggressive to make sure Alaska's voice is heard. I would like to say underlined in capitals, loud and clear. And we do it sometimes when our colleagues on both sides of the aisle may not like to hear it sometimes, but that's what we do, that's what we're there to do. Let me move this over.
Thank you, Senator Begich, and welcome not only to each of you as panelists this afternoon, but to each of you who's taken the time to leave the main hall and come and talk, listen, share about an issue that I think has really consumed so much of the conversation here at AFM this year here in Fairbanks. I would imagine that a good many of you heard my comments just a little over an hour ago, and I mentioned in those comments that when we're talking about subsistence, it is not only food security, it is cultural security. And this is one of the things that I don't think our colleagues understand. I think this is where they fail to relate and appreciate the life and the lifestyle that we have in Alaska that revolves around subsistence and traditional and customary use. It is relatively easy to keep track of your grocery bills if you live in Anchorage. You're just going to go ahead and you'll keep track of your receipts, you'll keep track of what you put on your credit card, and you will know generally how much your family spends to subsist, to eat. How do you account for the value when you bring a moose, a caribou, the deer, the salmon, the fish, the berries, all that you have harvested throughout the year that not only brings nutritional value to your family, but really kind of defines you. It's berry season. We don't call it fall, we call it berry season. It's moose season. We don't call it September. There is a different way of thinking, a different way of appreciation as to who it is that we are. And that's difficult for Washington to speak, to understand and interpret. And so what what the bean counters in Washington like to say is, well, what's the economic value of subsistence? And so we try to define that. But there is more to subsistence than just food security. It is cultural security. And so I would hope that in this field hearing of the Indian Affairs Committee, that you can share that to the best that we can capture that, so that others may understand that this is bigger than accounting for numbers. I've been on the Senate Indian Affairs Committee since I came to the Senate 10 years ago. It is a place where I feel that speaking up loud and clearly is absolutely critical to helping us with policies that are somewhat unique to us in Alaska. The opportunity to hear your voices is key. It's critical, and it is important that they will be rolled into the discussion back east. As you know, I've held a couple listening sessions with the Energy Committee, and we held a formal hearing in September on the Energy Committee. So we've got two different things that are going on here, just from a process perspective. The Energy Committee has jurisdiction over ANILCA. It's important to understand that. So if we're going to look to changes to ANILCA, that's where we address the jurisdiction. But when we're talking about food security, the Indian Affairs Committee and the relationship to our First Peoples here is important. I thank you, Senator Begich, for initiating this afternoon. I look forward to the comments from, again, not only those who have been invited to be part of the record, but for those who will speak to it. And I will give my apologies in advance. I'm probably not going to be able to sit through all of the scheduled discussion this afternoon, but to be part of it here is very important. I value your input and all that will now become part of the record in Washington, D.C. So thank you.
And just from a logistics, I'll let you grab that. It's like magic. It goes up and down. I'm afraid that. You sure you didn't have magic when you gave that? Okay, let's check. Again, the logistics will be that we're going to have. That's the cue. I'm done talking. Well, I have to introduce the panel, so I'll do my best here. First, I'll introduce them as they move down the aisle or down the table here. But the first one that we'll have to speak is Heather Kendall Miller. Heather, who I've known for a long time, has been instrumental in winning the Katie John Subsistence Hunting and Fishing Rights case. She has worked with other Alaska Native communities like the Native Village of Venati, the Native Village of Plutka, the Native Village of Barrow, the Nome Eskimo community, and the United States Tribes of Bristol Bay. The United Tribes of Bristol Bay. She has been very instrumental in many ways. I joke sometimes that no matter where I go, it seems in Alaska, Heather shows up. I don't know how she knows my schedule, but appears somehow and says, hey, I'm working on this issue, and it always seems to be around subsistence and food security. So Heather, it's just great to have you here. So I'll start with you, then I'll introduce each person as before they speak. Let me turn to Heather. Nope, the big one.
All right. Senators Murkowski and Senator Begich, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Heather Kendall Miller, and I'm a senior staff attorney with the Native American Rights Fund, a nonprofit law firm that represents Native tribes and federally recognized tribes to protect subsistence rights, tribal sovereignty, voting rights, and cultural resources. Let me begin by first thanking you for holding this field hearing today in Fairbanks to listen to the concerns of your constituents and Alaska Native people in particular. Those people are intimately connected to the lands and water from which they take natural resources for sustenance and enrichment of their way of life. As a Native American rights attorney, I have spent the better part of the last 20 years involved in the subsistence struggles of Alaska's Native peoples. In this capacity, I have had the great honor and privilege of representing the revered Ahtna elder Katie John, who successfully litigated in federal court to establish a federal priority to take fish in navigable waters in which the federal government owns an interest. The most recent Katie John decision upholding the federal priority to take a fish was issued in July of this year. Unfortunately, the state of Alaska continues to fight that outcome of that victory and has hired a top-notch DC law firm at great expense to seek certiorari review by the United States Supreme Court. The state of Alaska's petition is due next week on November 4th. In addition to defending the federal priority from attack by the state of Alaska in litigation, Alaska's Native people and the subsistence resources that they rely on are under great threat for other reasons. Whether it's from large-scale resource extraction, limited or restricted access to fish and game, or the increased scarcity of subsistence species, there is at present a dark reality facing Alaska Native people. The loss of subsistence resources correlates directly to the decline of health and wellness. As the United States Supreme Court noted in the seminal case U.S. v. Winans, I quote, "The right to fish is no less necessary to the existence of Native people than the atmosphere they breathe." This statement, made in 1904, is true today of Alaska's Native people. Indeed, the factual findings of your Senator Begich's recently introduced Traditional Foods Nourishment Act of 2013 attests to the fact that, and I quote, "Consumption of traditional foods is proven to benefit health, physical well-being, and fitness. The leading cause of death among Alaska Natives is diet-related health problems resulting in cancer and heart disease. Traditional foods, such as wild salmon, marine mammals, migratory birds, moose, caribou, berries, and plants, can have a positive impact when consumed regularly, and food plays an incredibly large part in the culture and lifestyle of the community." In addition to these findings in the Traditional Foods Nourishment Act of 2013, the importance of fish to the health and wellness of Alaska Native people has recently received heightened attention from the Environmental Protection Agency in its revised watershed assessment of potential mining impacts on salmon ecosystems of Bristol Bay. As you both are aware, Bristol Bay's salmon culture and the salmon species it depends on is under great threat of large-scale hard rock mining, the most notable being the proposed Pebble Mine. EPA initiated the Bristol Bay watershed assessment when it received a petition in 2010 from Bristol Bay tribes requesting that the agency take action under Section 404C of the Clean Water Act to prevent potential mining projects that would negatively impact the Nushagak and Begich rivers. These rivers are part of a watershed that supports the largest single spawning run of sockeye salmon in the world and one of the largest Chinook runs. In answering the tribe's petition, EPA engaged in the process of developing a comprehensive science-based watershed assessment addressing the potential mining related to impacts to Bristol Bay's waters, salmon, wildlife, and most importantly, its Native people. The petitioning tribes have since formed a tribal consortium, the United Tribes of Bristol Bay, to address the threats to their traditional way of life and subsistence resources posed by large-scale mining proposals. The United Tribes of Bristol Bay, or UTBB, possesses a unique power, separate from any other grassroots organization, and that is its unified political subdivision of the tribes, exercising delegated tribal governmental authority. With its delegated governmental authority, UTBB is able to engage federal government in direct government-to-government consultation on behalf of its member tribes. In developing the watershed assessment plan, EPA incorporated comments and suggestions of the tribes and expanded the scope of the watershed assessment to include potential mine-related impacts on such things as non-salmonid fish species, waterfowl, terrestrial wildlife, edible plants, and native salmon cultures. Incorporating work done by the noted anthropologist Dr. Alan Boris, EPA's watershed assessment plan found that Yupik Eskimos and Denali Indians of Bristol Bay represent two of the last remaining salmon cultures of the world. Today, those salmon make up nearly 82% of the subsistence diet in the region. Salmon are more than just a food source for Bristol Bay's residents. They are the foundation of a culture which has existed with little interruption for nearly 4,000 years. These salmon people incorporate all 5 species of Pacific salmon into their language, visual art, songs, and dance. They observe annual salmon-based ceremonies, such as the first step blessing of the waters. These examples are only but a small sampling of their salmon-centric universe. Now, I urge you both to take pause and not simply think about Bristol Bay and Pebble Mine as just an environmental or mining issue. It is, in fact, a food security issue as well. The proposed location for the Pebble Mine is directly on top of the wetlands that form the headwaters of the Cockatoo River, which flows into the Muchatna River, which flows into the Nooshnak River, which flows into the Bristol Bay. I want this committee to understand the concept of interconnectedness. From headwaters to ocean, these watersheds form a sustainable web, allowing salmon to complete their life cycle year after year. Just as those waters are interconnected, so are the people to the resource. Salmon are the primary food source in the region. Bristol Bay salmon are also the source of sharing practices, seasonal cycles, generations-old cultural expressions of wellness, and in sum, salmon are the basis for the entire way of life in Bristol Bay. There can be no doubt that the construction and operation of Pebble Mine will cause extensive damage to and the diminishment of salmon spawning and reproduction of Nooshnak and Kibach watersheds. It is the opinion of Dr. McCulty that the entire spawning runs will be eliminated in a large portion of those watersheds, and this elimination will essentially be irreversible. This will be especially evident in the Lake Clark area and will affect all the villages. Diminished salmon spawning means diminished wildlife in the area. Senator Begich, the Traditional Foods Nourishment Act of 2013 recognizes that food plays an incredibly large part in the culture and life cycle of the community. Only by recognizing the interconnectedness of Bristol Bay salmon and its people can you truly approach the Pebble Mine for what it is, a direct threat to the security of the region's primary subsistence resources. If, as the Traditional Foods Nourishment Act of 2013 indicates, this committee takes issues of food security for Indigenous people seriously, then I urge you to support the United Tribes of Bristol Bay in their request that the EPA finalize its revised watershed assessment plan by the end of 2013. And UTBB further urges you and this committee to publicly support EPA's use of its 404C authority under the Clean Water Act to prohibit and prevent the Pebble Mine development. And if there is any question as to where people in the region stand on this issue, I think you know well that the majority of them oppose this mine. And these are cards written to you by the people in the region asking you to fully support EPA and its authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can always count on Heather to be very detailed in her presentation. Thank you very much. Thanks for these here. Before I go on to Mary Pete, I did see, and in all fairness, I think I thought I saw was Bill Walker out there. I know he was here earlier, and I just wanted to recognize him if he was still here. But I do want to, again, thank you for these, and these will be part of the record. The next individual is Mary Pete. Mary was appointed to the U.S. Arctic Research Commission by President Obama on June 25th, 2010. Since 2005, Mary has been the director of the UAF Kuskokwim campus in Bethel, Alaska between 1996 and 2005. Mary has served as the director of the Subsistence Division for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, overseeing a research program and advocating for the protection of subsistence rights with a statewide staff. Mary.
Thank you, Senator Begich. Hopefully this is on.
You can just push that mic over a little bit.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to speak to my role as a U.S. Arctic Research Commissioner, as well as former director and researcher with the Department of Fish and Game Division Subsistence, and also as someone who grew up and studied along the very.
Go a little closer to that.
All right.
Pretend you're Mick Jagger.
Dangerous thing to say.
For some of the younger folks, they looked at me like, who?
So I wanted to point out 4 facets of food security that the U.S. Arctic Research Commission brought up in its goals report. The Commission is charged with putting together research goals and objectives for Arctic research every 2 years. And in its recent goals report, it brought up 4 facets. One is availability, whether there are sufficient amounts of food on a consistent basis. Access, whether there are sufficient economic and physical resources to obtain appropriate foods. Use, whether use is appropriate based on knowledge of basic nutrition and care, as well as adequate water and sanitation. And lastly, stability, whether the availability, access, and use over time is stable. And in terms of food security and subsistence, I think subsistence has provided a secure food source. It is the basis of our economic systems in our villages. When I think of issues with and concerns about food security, I would often think of the road-connected marine highway communities where if you didn't get a jet for a certain amount of time or the road was blocked, you couldn't get food trucked in or flown in, and the grocery stores would then go low on food. That's sort of my idea. However, in looking at recent surveys and discussions with people in communities, I live in Bethel, there are concerns about food security, the quantity, the quality, the health of resources. There's many challenges to subsistence economic systems due to climate change, the unknown mortality events with marine mammals, uncertainty in interpretation of regulations, increased competition, and treaties as well. I mean, the obligation to provide for treaty obligations along the Yukon River for shared salmon resources is higher than subsistence in our own nation. So there's many reasons to be concerned about all these facets in food security in Alaska. As you've heard from both senators and Heather, subsistence really is the foundation of our economic system and a big feature of our Alaska Native cultures in the state of Alaska. It is defined by, provided for, and protected in both state and federal law. And the question really is whether those definitions, provisions, and protections are meaningful and important for our villages. I think that really should be the key to our discussion here. And change is part and parcel of subsistence. Our resources fluctuate, their migration routes vary, our preparation ability to harvest resources is highly personalized. An outboard motor may break. Nets may be set in a place that's not conducive to the migratory route of fish, or caribou may go further inland. There's many factors that affect how productive hunters and fishers and gatherers are from year to year. And in my former role as division researcher and then director for Subsistence Division, I recall there was one community, Kivalina, where we had really good data points over since the early 60s. We had about 20-year interval data points of their subsistence output for 1 year. And it was interesting to note that the early cycle, in this, I think 63, 64 year, caribou was the featured species. It was the highest produced species for that annual cycle. The next data point in the mid-80s, marine mammals and caribou were equally important, in part because caribou that year had migrated further inland. And the last data point in 2007 showed bearded seal as the most produced species by poundage, and caribou even lower than Dolly Varden. And I'm sure Kivalina families felt some uncertainty. They were unsettled by the changes, but they still produced the per capita pounds needed to feed their families. We're adaptable, we adjust, we see what's there, and we appreciate what nature brings. But I think the rapid changes and the uncertainty and the health of some resources really does become a challenge for feeding our families and makes it unsettling for the future. And certainly court cases, I was one of the experts in the civil disobedience case of fishermen on the Kuskokwim. The 25 fishermen left that pled not guilty in 2012. They fished
in 2012. And certainly it could be seen as civil disobedience, but it was a cultural imperative for them to fish. And the courts thankfully saw it as them having a religious right to fish. Of course, on the flip side of the coin was that the state also had a reason to limit access to Chinook salmon. But that year was one of the hardest I've ever witnessed in terms of subsistence fishing on a major river in Alaska. The 12-day closure was horrible. It really was horrible. As a researcher, it would have been a difficult year as a researcher for me to do that work. As a bystander, I work for the university now, and as a fisherwoman in Bethel, I can't imagine how it was for people in the villages. Working with them, preparing for the court case, gave me a glimpse of how difficult it was. Families ran out of fish in October. These are products that should be available to families throughout the entire winter. So it was understandable that they felt it was a cultural and religious imperative to go fish. These are law-abiding people. And in working with them on the case, preparing for the court case, talking about the federal and state regulatory platforms that should have protected their access to fish. It was very, very interesting to hear their views. It's true that you really don't understand laws or regulations until you need to, but the misunderstanding about what's available and what rights they have was a little startling. And granted, I was a researcher, I was not a manager. Over the 20 years that I worked for the state, it was still very unsettling to hear how little understanding there is of our own laws and regulations. And I'm hoping hearings like this and our discussion brings that to the forefront. I hope people have more access to how the laws should work. And as I mentioned, subsistence is provided for. It's the priority use. It should be the last use eliminated if there's a shortage. And there are tools within the regulatory framework of both federal and subsistence law to provide for that in times of shortage. We should be able to determine who has the most dependence and has the least alternatives for any game population and fish stock. These are difficult decisions to make, but we can make them, and I think we should challenge authorities and encourage tribes, the state government and the federal government to work together to design ways to protect subsistence and make sure those that are most in need have access to them. I will close my comments there, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good, Mary. Thank you very much for that. The next person I have is Walter Sampson. Walter is Vice President of NANA Regional Corporation's Land Regional Affairs Department. Walter is a NANA shareholder from Norvik who brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in land selection and understands and clearly understands traditional subsistence rights. And also, Walter is a proud Vietnam veteran, and I have to say, Walter, you are also one, and you, I think, know this, when we were trying to fix the law so veterans can get health care anywhere in the state. It was some of your personal testimony that was shared with other groups, veterans groups nationally. Honestly, that made the difference. And so I want to thank you personally for that, because your story as a Vietnam vet in a rural community turned people to understand the value of ensuring you have health care wherever you are. So thank you for that on a special note. But let me go ahead and turn to Walter. Walter?
Thank you very much, Senator Begich, Senator Mikulski. Thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to hopefully pass on information that certainly would be needed. Always welcome to the NANA region. You are certainly part of the family of the Native communities throughout the state of Alaska. And this has been shown here at the conference this year. My name is Walter Sampson, son of the late Millard and Stephen Sampson of Norvik. I was traditionally adopted by my grandmother, Effie, and she instilled EPAC values in me as I was growing up. Impact values include cooperation, sharing, humility, hard work, and respect for others. Noorvik is a community of about 700 people located northeast 40 miles of Kotzebue, Alaska. Kotzebue is located 549 miles northwest of Anchorage and 30 miles above the Arctic Circle. Noorvik is one of the 11 communities in the Nana region that is approximately the size of Indiana. I have worked with Nana Regional Corporation since really its creation in 1972. Currently serve as a Vice President of Lands. Nana will own approximately 2.3 million acres of land once title has been conveyed to Nana. Nana is also represented by 13,500 shareholders who are the descendant of the Inupiaq people of Northwest Alaska. Nana exists to improve the quality of life for our people by maximizing economic growth, protecting and enhancing the 2.2 million acres of land we retain as part of Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, and promoting healthy communities with decisions, actions, and behaviors inspired by our Inupiaq values. At Nana, we like to say that we live in two worlds with one spirit, meaning that we will not forsake our traditional values when participating in modern economy. We can be Inupiaq and bring our native values to the table when examining business opportunities. In fact, I think this is our greatest strength. We are pleased with President Obama's executive order on tribal consultation, because at Nana we know firsthand the importance of holding the scale as we balance our subsistence way of life with responsible resource development. To us, responsible resource development involves meeting consultation with our shareholders, our communities, and the tribal governments. As many of you know, Nana owns Red Dog Mine, one of the world's largest zinc mine, located 90 miles north of Kotzebue. For more than 30 years, Red Dog has had a direct positive impact on the lives of the corporation's more than 13,500 Inupiaq shareholders. We have worked hard with the mine's operating partner, Teck, to protect the environment, our subsistence way of life, provide jobs and economic opportunities for our shareholders. Revenues from the mine have allowed us to grow our businesses and strengthen our cultural identity. But the path to development, Red Dog, was not easy. Before the mine was approved by our people, it took years of outreach and consultation with the communities in the Nana region. In fact, consulting with our shareholders was the single most important step in the mine's development. As in fact people, consultation are more like family meetings. We move forward cautiously and deliberately because we know that the business decisions we make affect every aspect of our life. And as we value the perspective that each member of our community brings to the discussion, at our consultation, we involve our elders. They are our history keepers. They remind us of our values, of who we and the roads that we've taken to maintain what is sacred to our impact culture. They guide us to where we're going and remind us that the choices we make today are promises to future generations. We conducted this kind of consultation as we work to develop Red Dog Mine. We traveled to each of our 11 villages many times over a period of about 10 years to consult with our shareholders. And while we and our partners of Cominco, now Tech, provided information about the proposed project, the most important activity we engaged in was listening. We listened to the views and concerns of our shareholders and the community leadership. We knew that the mine could have an effect on our subsistence way of life if not done in a responsible manner. Not only could it negatively impact our ability to gather the food necessary to sustain our communities, but our ability to pass on the tradition of hunting, fishing, and gathering for our future generations. It is through that tradition that our children learn patience, cooperation, learning to prepare, respect for nature, sharing, and other important impact values. We also knew that the future demanded that our children be prepared to participate in modern economy. The mine also provided the opportunity for NANA to develop our business, to provide dividends and long-term benefits to our shareholders. It would also provide an opportunity to have jobs in the region, attain greater access to education and job skills. The mine would also provide the regions the opportunity to establish a borough government, including a school district, giving the people of the region a greater ability to participate in local governance. When we chose as a region and people to develop the Red Dog Mine, we knew we were there. There were risks. We knew there were benefits. But most important, we knew we want to be the ones to weigh them. It was imperative to move forward with a unified decision. It was only after our shareholders agreed that we entered into the long-term partnership that addressed the risks and resulted in the development of the mine. The agreement included creating Subsistence Committee comprising of members from Kivalina and NOTAP, representing the hunters from two communities closest to the mine to gain from their traditional knowledge. In addition, the agreement also created an employment and training committee to ensure the benefits we hope for with regards to employment and training. As a result, today, we have the best of two worlds. We have enriched and sustained our IPAC identity, and we have mechanisms that assist us in participating fully in the modern American economy. Today, NANA and the Red Dog Mine continues to travel to the 11 villages of the NANA region to discuss the impacts of the mine, ways we can improve, and report on the benefits of the mine. These very values continue to guide our business decisions in the exploration phase of the Upper Cobalt Mineral Project. Today, the Arctic is changing. Sea ice is retreating, presenting both challenges and opportunities. As we prepare for our future in the Arctic, we must continue to work together and cooperate in times of change. We are now seeing significant changes in our weather patterns and to the sea ice. These changes are affecting the migratory patterns of marine mammals and caribou herds. These changes are affecting the subsistence way of life and will affect how our communities and culture survive. These changes also present the opportunity for responsible development like Red Dog that can lead to better infrastructures to support our community, increased opportunity for the workforce development, and the potential to continue to pass our impact culture. Any project we enter into must continue to engage the people of the Arctic to weigh the risks, its pressure to our way of life against the benefits and opportunities. Continued consultation and cooperation must occur. The federal government, state government, industry, and private investors must approach Arctic policy and development in our homeland in a meaningful manner. To us, responsible resource development includes more than just extracting what is in the ground. It means maintaining and protecting our subsistence resource because it is the seals, the fish, the beluga, the waterfowl, and the caribou that sustain us. It is using our culture, resources, our art, stories, and dance to strengthen and guide the next generation. It is the developing of the economies of our villages so our people don't have to choose between feeding their family and staying in their ancestral homes. Above all, it is developing the potential of our people so they have the opportunity to engage fully in the present modern economy while honoring and maintaining who we are as Inupiats. As we listen to different presentation, I hope that the perspective that I gave, that we can live as Inupiats, as well as taking advantage of the cash economy to reinforce the culture, to reinforce the traditions of our Inupiat people. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Walter. Let me go to our next speaker. It is Yvonne Peter, the former Netsaw Gwich'in Chief of Arctic Village, founder of the Indigenous Leadership Institute, the current CEO of Issaquah LLC, has served as the co-chair of the Gwich'in Council of International and executive board of the Alaska Tribal Council. What haven't you done? I'm looking at your list here. Yvonne has also experienced working with the United Nations, Arctic Council, forum representing indigenous and environmental aspects. He holds a bachelor's in Alaska Native Studies and has completed all the coursework toward a master's in rural development. A well-accomplished gentleman. You are next. Thank you.
Shalaknai, Shoji Yvonne Peter Oji, Vashain Kogutsan Ethli, Nets Aiguchan Ethli, Ides Koyakan Ethli, Nahuat in Shoethli. Welcome to the lands of the Diné Athabascan people of interior Alaska. Our people have lived here for 14,000 years. According to the archaeological digs, our people think a little bit longer. and we have food security. We're the longest standing continuous residents of Alaska. Our ancestors effectively managed the natural resources to ensure that future generations would thrive from the bounty of our lands and that we would remain a strong, healthy people. Then, 146 years ago, void of dialogue with our tribal chiefs and leaders, the United States claimed ownership and plenary power over our indigenous nations, lands, waters, and resources. We were declared uncivilized and denied basic equality and freedom, the founding tenets of the United States Constitution. This colonization perpetuates injustice and is the foundation upon which a continuing violation of our human rights persists to this day. Over the last 100 years, our people have patiently advocated to acquire basic rights such as to own land, to end segregation, and to acquire voting citizenship. In the 1960s, Congress failed to afford Alaska's indigenous peoples the opportunity to enter into government-to-government treaty negotiations to settle federal land claims. You see, we are a respectful, sharing people. If we had been invited into a fair treaty negotiation, we would have transformed world history and paved the way toward a harmonious, sustainable coexistence. Instead, Congress chose to unilaterally enact the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971, extinguishing Aboriginal hunting and fishing rights and Aboriginal claim based on use and occupancy. Still, despite this act, Congress placed clear expectation on the state of Alaska and the U.S. Secretary of Interior to protect the subsistence needs of Alaska Native peoples. This expectation was never fulfilled, resulting in Congress passing provisions in ANILCA. Alaska Native leaders at the time called for the restoration of Alaska Native hunting and fishing rights. Instead, Congress opted to provide a subsistence priority for rural residents with the intention to protect Alaska Native hunting and fishing practices. This attempt failed to protect our way of life. The state of Alaska and federal agencies have failed us, leaving our traditional food systems under imminent threat. Our resources are being decimated at alarming rates. Our people are being denied access to traditional hunting and fishing, and we continue to be excluded from a meaningful role in management of renewable hunting and fishing resources. The harvesting and sharing of fish, game, and other resources, and the ceremonies that accompany these practices provide for the social, cultural, spiritual, and economic survival of our communities. Unfortunately, we can no longer remain patient as our people and communities are dying from a cultural genocide, being denied our way of life. This is resulting in high rates of substance abuse, suicide, domestic violence, anxiety, and generational trauma. Our villages lack economic opportunity, lack access to quality education, lack adequate infrastructure, and lack access to affordable, sustainable, healthy food systems. You see, I grew up with my grandfather. He and the other people in my village taught me the ways of respecting the land and animals so that they would return to us every season to nourish our body and spirit. It was explained to me that there are appropriate times and conditions to harvest each species so that the health and number of animals would not be adversely impacted. If certain species began to overwhelm others or block the capacity of regeneration, such as a beaver dam, blocking up a critical spawning stream, we would take action to re-sustain a balance. As a child, I thought that this way of life and knowledge handed down to me would simply last forever, as our tribe was so remote. Little did I know that Alaska Natives across the state were already suffering greatly from the failure of Congress to protect our people's civil and human rights. Little did I know that as an adult I would be a criminal for practicing the sustainable way of life that I inherited from my grandfather and our ancestors. Little did I know that political posturing and mismanagement of fish and wildlife between the state and federal governments would result in a critical threat to the food security of our peoples. Little did I know that I would be sitting here today to defend our way of life. I have to tell you, our Native grandmothers, grandfathers, brothers, sisters, and sons and daughters are suffering. Our fishermen's nets are being cut. Hunters' moose are being seized from their freezers. Elders are fined for practicing the way of life that they were taught by their elders. We are criminalized every day of the year for simply being who we are and who we have always been. When traditional foods are made to be inaccessible, we are left to rely upon highly expensive processed foods. This is a very difficult situation in remote villages where household incomes fall far beneath the poverty line and unemployment far exceeds national rates. I have to ask, has the federal government and state of Alaska not benefited tremendously from the wealth of resources in Alaska over the last 100 years? Have our people not treated you with respect? Is it too much to ask for justice and equality in our own homeland? This is a critical moment in the history of Alaska. It is not too late for the federal government and state of Alaska to turn the tides of injustice and bring our people into the fold of equality. It is not too late to make necessary investments in our cultures and villages so that we may all face a more secure future. The first steps towards food security and equality are simple. First, Alaska Native people's right to hunt and fish must be restored. Second, our tribal governments must be recognized with equal co-management authority. The Alaska Native wisdom that provided food security for 14,000 years would contribute greatly towards sustainable resource solutions for all people. Today you have the opportunity to fix a failed system, ensure cultural survival, and literally put food back on the table for Alaska Native peoples. Yes, sir. At the beginning, when I was talking my language, I said I was happy to be here with you all, and I welcomed you all here, and I was happy to see you all here. And I appreciate the invitation by Senator Begich for Mikowski showing up here. I look forward to us working together for us to transform Alaska and set an example for the world to bring an end to colonization and to charge forward to a sustainable future for our people. So, Thank you very much.
Well said. Before we started, I was walking, greeting everyone, and I said to Yvonne, "You ready?" And he goes, "I'm taking a deep breath. I'm ready." You did a great job. Thank you for your presentation. Our next presenter is Melanie Benke. Melanie is President Clark, a regional Native nonprofit corporation and tribal consortium representing 20 tribes in the Bering Straits region of Northwest Alaska. She also serves as the Alaska Federation of Natives Board of Directors and is the co-chair of the AFN Committee on Nonprofit CEOs, the Council for Advancement of Alaska Natives. Melanie also holds a master's degree in rural development.
Senator Begich and Senator Murkowski, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. Participants, thank you for your presence. There are many great giants in this room, and I feel as though I stand on your shoulders as I speak today. Respected Senators, I am a Kishpokara. My English name is Melanie Benke. I am a St. Lawrence Island Yupik and was raised in the village of Savunga. I am a descendant of a long line of people who have relied on the sea and land to sustain us in one of the harshest climates in the world. I am a tribal member of the Native Village. I am here and grateful for the opportunity to share my perspectives and recommendations. I have been asked to explain in a brief amount of time the importance of traditions, family, and Native values as new federal policies are being developed to achieve sustainable communities. This is a tall order, almost akin to explaining how rituals, church traditions, and spirituality are important to the continuation of religion. The cost of living in rural Alaska is astronomical, and our people are plagued by a myriad of social conditions attributed to historical trauma stemming from actions aimed to assimilate our people into Western society. For us, subsistence is critical for our continued survival as individuals, families, communities, and it is also the cornerstone of our continued survival as a people. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which was ratified by the U.S. Congress in 1992, states, "In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence." So what is subsistence? The dictionary defines subsistence as a non-monetary economy which relies on natural resources to provide for basic needs through hunting, gathering, and subsistence agriculture. It means supporting oneself at a minimum level. I believe that this gives only a partial explanation for the meaning of the word, at least as far as Alaska Natives are concerned. The new term food security is also only partially descriptive. To limit describing our way of life to food security would be like viewing the bread and wine of communion for the poverty-stricken from purely a nutritional standpoint. Unfortunately, rather than embracing the subsistence rights of Alaska Natives, we find that the federal and state governments, of which we are citizens, have figuratively declared a silent war on us as a people, using laws, regulations, policies, fines, and criminalization as weapons. Our battlefield has been in the halls of Congress, the state legislature, Board of Fish and Game meetings, and courtrooms. We abide by the laws, the regulations, and the policies because we fully recognize ourselves as citizens of both the state of Alaska and the United States of America. However, until our full rights to subsistence are restored, we remain prisoners of war in our own state, in our own country, denied the right to fully participate in the decisions that affect our survival as a people. This is a figurative description of the current situation. More literally, Alaska Natives are subjected to the complex, multi-jurisdictional policies developed and enforced by agencies staffed by individuals with little knowledge of our subsistence culture and needs, who have assumed the authority to manage and control the natural resources on which we are completely dependent. The Bering Strait region is fortunate to have unique resources on the land, in the air, and in the sea. We harvest migratory birds, salmon, walrus, ice seals, bowhead, beluga, minke whales, crab, halibut, moose, muskox, caribou, and those are just a few. However, these wildlife species live in many different environments and many are migratory. Various congressional acts influence how they are managed and they are under many different jurisdictional regimes. Our indigenous hunters and fishermen know that to change policies or regulations regarding allocations, bag limits, licenses, permits, and bird stamps, that he or she must approach the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Federal Subsistence Board, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, the Board of Fish, the Board of Game, the National Marine Fisheries Service, the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Park Service, or the International Whaling Commission, depending on the animal species. Although we were the first users, the first stewards, and the first managers of resources in Alaska, we are now subjected to submitting proposals, submitting testimony, and commenting for 3 minutes to be engaged with managers, and are ultimately at the mercy of the decision makers, the majority of whom are not representative of Alaska Natives, nor are they knowledgeable of our subsistence culture. Oftentimes, we are considered a special use group and therefore must compete with very well-funded national user groups who, with their ability to hire experts in policy and science and attend every meeting, can influence regulatory and management decision makers. We are extremely concerned about impacts of increased shipping on our subsistence hunters and resources in the Bering Sea. Because of climate change, the Bering Strait is remaining ice-free for longer periods of time, and data indicates a drastic increase in shipping activity through the Northwest Passage and the Northern Sea Route. Hunters' ability to safely and successfully harvest the marine resources that we rely on are jeopardized. Our natural resources are exposed to significant risk as increased shipping is occurring in our front yard. We communicate these concerns and make recommendations to the U.S. Coast Guard and National Planning Committees, yet we are not able to establish nor require enforcement of safety requirements in terms of vessel specifications, standards for cargo, areas to be strictly avoided, discharge of contaminants into our waters, etc. Much of the food that we eat comes from the sea. Imagine if the grazing areas of the cattle for your beef was allowed to be a dumping ground for waste and contaminants. We appreciate the work of the U.S. Coast Guard in working with our constituents to identify recommended shipping routes in the Bering Strait and encourage continued involvement to educate people and take into consideration the traditional knowledge our people have to offer. We want to be given opportunities to participate in forums involving traditional Alaska Native users and people from neighboring Arctic countries who use similar methods and often go after shared resources. We recommend marine research and funding be increased to document baseline information regarding our resources. We are living examples of how global climate change is affecting people. We face increased erosion due to frequent and severe coastal storms. Climate change is affecting our ability to live our subsistence way of life. While it isn't possible for government agencies to replace the cultural and traditional value of the lost subsistence harvests due to the low walrus in Gamble and Savunga this year, it will be extremely critical to each of those communities to have some economic support for the lost nutrition and walrus and ivory. I recommend that the state and federal agencies coordinate and work with these two villages and their leadership to determine appropriate actions to provide some form of economic relief, such as energy assistance or heating oil or food. We are approached to provide comments after the fact regarding plans for addressing changes in the Arctic. We have commented to many, many different forums on many, many different plans regarding the Arctic. These are often follow-up meetings to reports that have already been published. We need to be included not after the fact, but at the onset of planning. Alaska Natives deserve to have a more meaningful role in the protection of our resources and the management of our resources. Certain federal acts, such as the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Migratory Bird Act, recognize Indigenous use and dependence on resources. The acts attempt to include the Indigenous people through establishment of co-management bodies, such as the Eskimo Walrus Commission, the Alaska Nanook Commission, the Alaska Migratory Birds Co-Management Council, and yet the Alaska Native people serving on those co-management bodies are frustrated when their recommendations and objections are overridden by the state and federal representatives, often voting together, blocking valid recommendations to protect or carefully allow subsistence harvest of migratory birds or other resources. In some cases, we are provided one seat at the back of the bus, and in other cases, we are not even being allowed on the bus. The government-to-government relationship needs to be truly implemented, and Alaska Natives afforded equal footing in decision-making forums that manage and regulate the very resources that we are wholly dependent upon. We are bearing the brunt of conservation for the wildlife species that have declined, more so than commercial users. In some cases, we have voluntarily imposed moratoriums on ourselves when game managers do not enact the proper measures to protect our resources, such as in Unalakleet, who imposed upon itself a period of time where the hunters agreed not to take moose until the population rebounded. There is a need to recognize both traditional and scientific knowledge in the management of our resources, and for Alaska Natives to be included as decision makers. Protecting our resources and environment to perpetuate the culture and tradition of the highly valued subsistence lifestyle we live is a top priority. A recent project funded by the Rasmussen Foundation in our region, in which youth were surveyed, revealed that our youth sorely want to be involved in traditional and cultural practices. The traditional and cultural practices which we teach the youth stem from participation in subsistence activities during which we teach habitat, biology, food processing, food preservation, language, respect for the environment, hard work ethic, a sense of community, and celebration for the catch. Senators, I believe that the state of Alaska, the federal government, and Alaska Natives all share a common goal of abundance of our resources. For Alaska Natives, including us in the decision-making processes to allow us to take part in achieving this goal is paramount. These are the things that must be considered as policies are developed to achieve sustainable communities. In order to accomplish this for the Alaska Native Society, we need to work together, not against each other. We need the state and federal government to stand with us as allies and not on opposing sides of a courtroom as our adversaries. As for your part in this point in time of history, the story is still unfolding. The actions of this state legislature, this state government, this Congress, and this administration stand to either perpetuate the genocide of a culture or to help ensure the survival of a people and the core of its identity. It is my hope that you be granted the strength, fortitude, and the will to ensure the latter. We look forward to working with you toward this end. Thank you, Senators, for allowing me to address you today. Igamsi kayo, bigamsi.
Thank you very much. We have two more speakers. We've gone a little longer than we thought, but let me just say that what an incredible panel so far, wouldn't you say? Some incredible testimony. Our next one is Rob Sanderson. He's the president of Ketchikan Tlingit Haida Community Council. He's also served as second vice president of the Central Council on Tlingit Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska and a lifelong fisherman. I don't know why they added that because we're all in a way lifelong fishermen, but you are special. So let me go to you, Rob, and then we do have our last speaker after that will be Nelson, which is the special 19-year-old.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did provide a full, complete file. Obviously, it's not there. So,
I think these are pretty good because I'm part of your clan, so I'm okay.
That's right, you are. Yes. All right. Well, I would first of all, Mr. Senator, thank you. Lisa, thank you for being here today. My name is Rob Sanderson, Jr. I serve as the second vice chairman of the Tlingit Haida Central Council, Tribes of Alaska. I also serve as the president of the Tlingit Haida Community Council in Ketchikan. I also serve as the vice chair of the Ketchikan Indian Community. What I'm about to say here today directly affects our children. That is why I am here today. If we are doing this for ourselves, we're selfish. We need to do this for our children, our grandchildren, and our unborns. And I'm saying this before I get into my testimony. I would not be here today if it were not for my kids. And that is our most important, precious resource that we can ever have from across this. So with that, Mr. Senator, I'm going to go into my testimony. Thank you. I want to talk about a couple of issues here today. One being balance, the economy, and our spiritual connection to the land. Balance. The overregulation of our subsistence resources have thrown our rural communities out of balance. The loss of our ability to harvest what is needed to sustain our livelihoods has left most of us rural Alaskans in conflict with their traditional beliefs and the modern system of management. More emphasis is needed to be placed on giving the ability to manage the wild fishing game back to the customary and traditional users of our land. This will help bring our communities and people back into balance with our resources. Stewardship of the land is essential for the long-term health of everything that lives in the areas that we harvest. Balance is everything. Without it, we have nothing. Our spiritual connection, which I believe is probably the most important, Mr. Senator. Our spiritual connection to the land, air, and sea, and resources which are abound, give our people purpose and identity. Remember that, identity. It is more than just a food source. It provides the ability to harvest resources from nature, which gives each person, family, and community a reason to live in an area they have settled. There is a special connection to the land, air, and sea to which our Alaska Native people have developed. Thousands of years of that special relationship shaped an identity of our people. Thousands of years is where we're at today. An identity of our people that will still associate today. We use ceremonial regalia that depict clan crests which our ancestors had encountered with an animal, bird, sea life, or an environment when harvesting, gathering, hunting, fishing, traveling, migration, and even war. These special encounters have an animal or environment to this day survived and remind us that our people have endured to sustain determination and perpetuate the history of our subsistence, our way of life, for the next 7 generations. The harvest results in food, shelter, heat, and our artistic accomplishments. This opportunity also nourishes the bodies of our souls. This has been our way of living since time immemorial, our way of life. The ability of our hunters to gather, to bring the spoils and share with the greater body bonds to our communities in ways that are still unknown to the greater population. Our economy, our way of life has always provided for the economy of our Alaska Natives. The ability to harvest adequate customary traditional resources in a short window of opportunity has proven instrumental to sustaining our way of life here in Alaska. Barter and trade has always provided stable economies in our traditional lifestyle, and this is the reality for most Alaska Natives today. It is just part of life when certain resources are always scarce, such as fuel in rural Alaska. The activity of barter and trade to meet our needs is what keeps most of us moving in the direction of tribal self-sufficiency. We must do all we can to protect this lifestyle, which we call our way of living. Social. The ability to gather resources in Alaska for a person, family, or community takes immense pressure off the state and federal government. And I'm going to hold there for a second. We as Alaska Native people should be able to harvest our traditional customary resources. It would take immense pressure off the federal government and the state of Alaska. But yet the federal government and the state of Alaska spends millions regulating us, trying to push us down, for us trying to make that livelihood. They wouldn't really have to spend too much money now if they just let us go about and live our traditional lifestyle. That's a real easy one to figure out. Let us live our way of life, and we won't have to take much of your resources to try for you, so you can help feed us. We don't need that. We're not a needy people. We're a proud people. We need to be able to practice our traditional lifestyle and take tremendous pressure off the state and federal government. So I'm going to move on with that. I just wanted to make that real clear. Very important. If the government had to provide for all of our needs in rural Alaska, the cost would be outrageous. Our way of life makes for the best social and economic benefits, which I share with you. I have enough, or you may share with me when I have enough, or if you need. That is just our way of caring for each other in tough economic times. It is our ability to do this for one another that gets us through each day. Reciprocation of food and wealth is a tradition that is the highest respect Our families and communities use wealth of the land, air, and sea to barter, trade, and share. The reciprocation of method of socially connecting from as far south to the points of southeast Alaska to the furthest points north. And this is the way our people socially connected to one another. Mr. Senator, I'm adding this into my testimony today, and it has to do with Begich. And to our tribal members in the audience today, please, all this testimony is for naught if you don't protect what's in that sea. Back in the early 1970s, we were so busy fighting about the land, we forgot about the sea, and it's coming back to haunt us in ways that we have no idea we don't know what's going to happen. Just last month, one dragger killed 104 10 tons of halibut. Think about that. But when we take one over the limit, we're cited, off to court, and sometimes even jailed for taking one fish over the limit. While things in the high seas the federal government is letting this happen. We need to educate ourselves as a people and take it to the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, to NIMS, to NOAA. It's pretty sad when tens of thousands of halibut and tens of thousands of king salmon, chinook, chum are being slaughtered out in the sea and kicked off over the side. And it's legal to do. But when we take one over the limit, trying to provide for our families, it's against the law. That needs to be stated, Mr. Senator. That is my testimony, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one last panelist, Nelson Kipnuck. Nelson is a 19-year-old and is the oldest sibling of 6 from Kipnuck. He, along with 6 other young plaintiffs who are asking the state of Alaska to recognize that our climate is changing and impacting the food and other resources we all share and depend on for survival. He is working to protect Village Alaska for future generations. Currently a freshman at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks. Nelson is a keynote speaker, or was a keynote speaker at the 2013 Elders Youth Conference themed "We Are Our Ancestors." Nelson, thank you for being here. Thank you for being another great role model for our young people. Thank you, Nelson. Please.
Thank you, Senator Begich. Thank you for inviting me to be on the panel. And Senator McCuskey, thank you for being with us here today. My name is Nelson Kipnuck, and in my Yupik language, my name is Angushtak, and I'm from the village of Kipnuck, Alaska. My father's name is William Kipnuck. He is from Kipnuck, Alaska, and my grandfather's name is Henry Kipnuck, and he's from Ganganuck, Alaska. On my mom's side, my mom's name is Sharon Kipnuck, and my grandparents on my mom's side are from Napakiak, Fritz and Alice Andrew. And before I begin with the testimony, I'd like to recognize that being a part of a community it's very important, especially for the youth to develop and build to who they will be when they take over the community, and teach the younger generations underneath them to be a part of the community. And because of being in a positive environment in the community, it made me aware of the issues that are being dealt with before my generation, such as now, and to see how that will directly affect us decades from now when it's our turn to talk to our youth. And with that, we need to recognize that the global climate change is affecting the smaller communities in rural Alaska through erosion and flooding. And if that doesn't change, we're going to have to get used to that. Flooding will be a normal part of our season in the villages. And relocating to other locations on another part of our land will be a normal part of our way of life. Unless we speak now and take action. And I'll begin with the food security in the villages. It's very important because we need to recognize that the majority of small villages depend on the very food that they gather throughout the year. With spring and summer together, only a couple months long, a very short time to gather all what we need for the long winter that we're going to face. And winter is brutal, cold, and back in the past, our ancestors, they suffered to survive in the wintertime because they didn't have a heated house to sleep in. They didn't have a grocery store to go to and say, I think we're going to have this tonight. They had to gather that while they had that short amount of time, that very short time that they had in the spring and summertime. And hold on. And with that said, the food security is so important because the cost of grocery in the village store, they are so high that it is impossible for us to live off of that year round, especially because the majority of the village, either lives off of unemployment or they just can't. There's the resource of having a job is just not there, or as much as they need it. And with that, we have a spiritual connection with the land and the water and the air. And with that, we practice our traditional and cultural ways to be spiritual with who we are in our native ways. And growing up, hunting and gathering was a big part of what we do. And without that, we wouldn't know what our ancestors did. And the other connection that we have with the economy in the villages revolves around, like we say, commercial fishing. That brings in the income for many of the fishermen. And with that, they are able to pay for their rent, their bills, and for what they can get to, the little gas that they can get to go out to practice their subsistence way of life. And with that, with our traditional ways of gathering, trading, that is how we kept, our relations with other tribes and other regions. That's how we kept our relations smooth. And now, that with the cost of gas, we can't go, because villages, they live on small rivers. And we can't just go back and forth to the village as we please. And with that, we have to use what little we have to gather what we can for the wintertime. Because in our household, about 90% of our diet is from the land, from the sea. And without that, we'd be starving. And we have to be careful with how the food is regulated, with how our fish limits are, with how our bag limits are. We have to be very careful with how we set that, because if it's too little, there's nothing that the parents could feed their children. And recognizing that the importance of carefully regulating that, it's so important. And now, and relating back to the fishing back in 2012 in the Kuskokwim region, I was over here in Fairbanks attending the Rural Alaska Honors Institute, and it hit me once I saw that the fishermen were cited and arrested for practicing their way of life, trying to feed their families. They broke the law. They broke the law to feed their families. And to fish as early as we can, as soon as the king salmon come in, is super important, because at our fish camp, when we try to fish early, we will avoid the flies when they come later on. Because if you don't, when the flies come, it'll be that much more harder to keep your fish clean and to put them away. And with the food security, and back in my home region, we have seals, we have salmon, herring, berries, and waterfowl. And to take care of that, it's a huge issue to juggle with, as we see now. And when I was younger, I used to think, what can I do? I'm just a little guy. What can I do? But I learned that it would, by sharing the story with how we're affected by both global climate change and how our food is regulated, it's kind of scary to think, how am I going to be able to take care of my children and my grandchildren when I go back to the village after I go to school, and how am I going to do that? And that's what goes in my mind from time to time. And along with the gathering of food, we celebrate in ceremony, like we celebrate the Salmonberry Festival. It's both a religious and cultural gathering where members of the community come together and sing and just have a good feeling and to prepare and pray for a good season of salmonberry picking. And along with that, there's another which I witnessed a couple of years ago near the village of Naposcat, where it was the blessing of the fleet to have a safe fishing season and to be able to get the fish enough to feed the families in the wintertime. And all of this revolves around both the spiritual and religion and ceremony, and it just ties back to our way of life. And with the balance, we have to be careful, very careful, that we do not gather too much of this one thing, like too much of the caribou or too much of the moose or too much of the seal, because will they come back next year? We don't know. And recognizing to keep the land and the sea clean is very important, because the halibut, the salmon, the seals, they can live without us. If we were gone tomorrow, they can keep going on. But if they're gone tomorrow, that's a scary thought. And the importance of food gathering is important in social life in the communities, because it gives a chance for a grandfather to take out their grandson or their granddaughter to go out and to show them where they can get fish, where they can get their berries. And without that social connection that they have with their host elders and the youth, the youth aren't going to know where to get the berries, where to get their salmon, or how to get them. And with the socialization that they live in the villages, it's important for them to keep that connection so that they can keep going with their cultures and keep going and keeping their people alive and recognizing that they are Alaska Native. Because that is where the power comes from. That is who they are. And that is who we are. And seeing the different changes that I see back home with the river erosion, the flooding, is very alarming, because a couple years ago there was a documentary made in Kipnik called Trust Alaska that shows with how the village is being affected with erosion and showing the evidence of climate change. It's there. It's real. It's not only in my village, it's in other villages across the state, such as the village of Newtop. They're in the process of moving their town. And in a few decades, maybe even sooner, it's going to be our turn to do that as well. And speaking of erosion, my house was located in front of the riverbank in Kipnik, and the river erosion, with the rate it was going, I thought we had maybe about 4 or 5 years till we have to move our house. Well, this spring, It was right at the footsteps at our house. And in the process of moving our house, we lost our house. Then from the flooding, the foundation was damaged, and it was a total loss. So my family was forced to move to a fish camp in Bethel for half the summer until we could find a place to restart our lives. And with that, it's important for our people to know who we are and to show our youth where they come from, bring them to their roots, to where they were born, and to show them who they are. Because without the youth, we would lose our way of life. We would lose our way of life. And that is a nightmare for me to think of. And even though that our culture is constantly changing, we still need to practice our traditional values and to connect with our people and our elders so that we can't forget where we came from. Anna, thank you.
Welcome, thank you very much. Thank you. Let me say this, we've run a little over, but it was a worthy panel to run over for, don't you think? Yeah. It was very good. Very good testimony, very good commentary. Now, in all fairness, what I want to try to do, I'm going to merge, because we have MSA here and afterwards, but we're going to merge it a little bit here, but I want to make sure the folks at the panel here, they can be dismissed. They do not have to sit up here. But we thank you very much for incredible testimony. This is all part of the record for the Indian Affairs Committee. A lot of good ideas, and I really appreciate the time that you took out of your busy day and out of the convention to be part of this very important, I believe, hearing that can get us more down the path to many of the reasons and many of the issues you have brought up today. So thank you very much for doing this. So you don't have to sit up here if you don't want to. That's your decision. But what I'm going to try to do now is shift to individuals to give their testimony for the record. Now I will ask in all courtesy, we want to try to limit so we can get as much into the record as possible to about 3 minutes each. But here's where I want to make sure. If you are here for MSA, thank you. If you are here for MSA, also Madison Stevens Act reauthorization, and you want to testify, we're going to kind of merge the public testimony and the listening session that was next. And the reason we're doing that is so we keep things moving, but give everyone a fair shake. So identify, I do have a couple for MSA that I do want to call on at some point to have them speak. But first, we'll start in the front here. But again, thank you all. I don't want to say you're dismissed, but you can stay as long as you want at this front table. It's your decision, but you are dismissed. They were waiting. It's almost like class or something. They were like, am I dismissed? Can I go? Absolutely. Again, for the record, we'd love you to identify your individual name, and then we'd like you to come forward and be able to testify. And again, thanks for all those that are lining up already. I'll give a moment there for the recording information. Thank you. You're on. And I think who will be timing, or what will be? Okay. And just so you know, again, we'd like to keep your testimony to 3 minutes, and then we would tell you to do this. For those that do want to make some commentary but don't want to publicly testify, there are these that are available. Please fill these out. We'll be happy to submit this for the record in the discussion. And let's go ahead and start. And I do want to do this because I'll do a couple of them. I'm calling you because I know you had identified to me already that you want to make sure you were close to the front line. But let's do about 2 or 3, and if I can have them move in, that would be great. And then, or first. And again, I'm going to look behind. Who's going to do the timer again? So Shauna goes like this. That means 3 minutes is up. If we could have courtesy in the room. If you have conversations, go ahead and take them outside, but let's go ahead and courtesy for the people that have been very, very patient. And identify, and then go ahead.
My name is Charles Degnan from Unalakleet, Alaska. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live in Unalakleet. I've lived there all my life. My father is Frank Degnan. He served in the territorial legislature. I served in the Alaska legislature. I'm a veteran. I have lived the subsistence life, and I've had to become educated through the university system because of the changing situation both in government and its regulatory process. What I would recommend that the United States government to do is to recognize tribes fully, have them regulate their own seasons and bags, and based on traditional and customary practices. The other issue is that the state of Alaska needs to formally recognize tribes. It's very important. We have such a huge state with only 2 senators and 1 representative. And it does not make sense for us to have a state the size bigger than nations to try to mesh in different cultures. And right now the majority form of government does not recognize traditional people and the tribal people, but only incidentally. And there are many roadblocks, such as black bag limits for everything, seasons for everything, that are not realistic to each village that has a location in the state of Alaska that's different and have a different weather pattern, a different location, and different dependencies. There has been over 50 years over harvesting of the Bering Sea. I would ask you to amend the Magnuson-Stevens Act to have a Bering Sea management plan for the United States and have tribal members do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. I didn't realize she had timer cards too, so now we know you'll get like a warning, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Charles. Very good, thank you. Next person, thank you.
Madam Senator, my name is Catherine Elenak. I'm from Hooper Bay. The panel were wonderful, we all know, and the younger that the panel got, they got wiser, and they are a product of, they are our resources. They are economic resources that are coming up to help us. And I'd like to see if you guys can be involved with the National Tribal Operations Committee, Agricultural Department, and work with the tribes and learn from what the Lower 48 are doing, because there are some tribes that are saving seeds and the invasive species of the animals and the plants that are coming in and taking over the lands. There are animals that are in regions that aren't supposed to be there, and those need to be put into effect into this decision-making process too. And I really appreciate these people because it's bewildering, and it teaches us and lets us see the importance of the scholarship program to help our resources. They are. And our elders here, they said that, they're kids. I was a kid when they were saying me as a kid. Now I'm a grandma, and these young people are married now. But for Melanie, when we were going to Native Student Services in Anchorage, she's Yupik and I'm Yupik, but we have different dialect, and she was talking really fast. Melanie, slow down, the Russians aren't coming anymore.
Thank you very much. Sometimes I talk too fast too, so I know what that's like. Please.
Thank you, Senator Lance Kramer from Native Village of Coxview. I wanted to kind of tie up some loose ends, regarding subsistence, the impact it has on us, and I'm going to do it through an acronym that you'll never forget, through the acronym of SPEECHES. So when you get speeches, you'll remember subsistence. And the S stands for our spiritual well-being, as you heard from the panelists. When we subsist, we commune with God because we're in His backyard with His creation. And when there are laws and enforcement or development that gets in the way of that subsistence, it gets in the way of our spiritual well-being. Second, the P stands for our physical well-being. And 1 cup of salmon berries has the same amount of vitamin C as 8 oranges. 1 cup of sourdough has the same amount of vitamin A as 156 carrot sticks. 1 ptarmigan flying through the air has the same amount of iron as 7 hamburger patties. And so when we have laws and enforcement or development that hinder that nutritional value coming to our people, such as within the Elders Care Center in Kotzebue, where they have to give them mashed potatoes and green beans instead of what they need, it affects our physical well-being. Third, the first E stands for education. A lot of subsistence, there's education involved in it. We learn more about biology and chemistry, math, and everything else when we subsist, more than we do when we learn in the classroom. The second E stands for economic development. I did my subsistence footprint a couple of weeks ago, and it turns out that on the average, every year I take about 6,000 pounds worth of meat and flesh. I also gained $8,000 in furs that I trap per year. Also, my family harvests 17 gallons of plants and berries. And so that's just an average. Now, I don't consume 6,000 pounds. My family, we share quite a bit of it. But nevertheless, it turns out when I did the economic part of it, I actually make more money subsisting than I do in my job. So it's important economically. The C stands for confidence. It gives us confidence. You know, you realize that these burial people, when they're walking around with a stiff back because they landed the biggest marine mammal in our planet. You know, they're confident those dead would be from a very small boat. When we have laws and enforcement and development that hinder our subsistence, you're hindering our confidence as a people. And then the H stands for hunger. When we subsist, we feed. There are people, I can have a pizza, but there are people who actually go out on the ice and Kotzebue and fish because they're hungry. And so subsistence has an effect on that. The E stands for empowers. That subsistence way of life, it empowers us as a people to move on and to do things that we never would be able to do. And then lastly, the S stands for our social well-being. When we subsist, our families are strengthened because we learn how to react and react to each other. And so it's so important for us. So I just want to leave it at that, so when you give speeches, remember that acronym, and you'll go a long way. Thank you for this time.
Thank you very much. That was very good.
Hello, I'm Gary Klein, United Tribes of Bristol Bay. Since we're talking about food security or cultural security, I felt like I had to say something because those are the two main reasons I moved back home to Bristol Bay 3 years ago after acquiring a degree in international business. I understand that most of our global food supply is driven by oil. I believe 2/3 of the world's food supply depends on it. Well, I'm fortunate. In our area where I live, our salmon, our caribou, our moose do not depend on oil. Yes, we drive motorized boats, it makes our life easier at the moment. But if we were to go through a crisis or gas shortage, we could always go back to the sailboat era that my grandfather participated in. Not only provided food to our dinner table, but throughout the world. When talking about cultural identity or religious views, when I was going to school out of state, I felt disconnected, I felt lost. I felt disconnected from my ancestors and environment. So I feel like at times, my churches, when I go to the same spots my grandparents used to harvest resources, I feel like they are there with me, picking my fish and cutting up our moose. And the moment I disrespect my resources, my environment that they come from, is the moment I lose respect for my ancestors. So I urge you to think of the impact of your decisions that will have on our people, not in just a physical health sense, but mental health. Because I can tell you from living in the area at ground zero, I could see psychological stress increasing in ways you guys will never see. Especially among our youth. And I gotta refer to a quote that Yvonne Peter was at a wellness conference by this guy named Kuzluk from Cleveland. He said, and it stuck with me, he said, sometimes you feel so stressed out that it feels like a splinter is embedded in your brain that you can't prick out. And it causes a constant headache. Well, a lot of my people, the young people, they feel like there's no hope. They feel like we're fighting a losing battle and their voices aren't being heard. I'm trying to paint a picture of hope. I want them to understand how powerful their voices can be if they utilize it, especially as tribal members. And I'm hoping that we'll have someone in office, a true champion, that will truly respect and understand our rights as Indigenous peoples. And so thank you for your time. I look forward to you on providing solutions, local solutions. One thing I would request is seeing a subsistence category implemented in the Bristol Bay Area Plan as a primary use, because that has always been the primary use on our land, not recreational fishing or oil and gas or minerals. They should always be considered when looking at developmental issues. Thank you.
Senator, I'm Steve Avanoff. I represent Burn Straits Villages to the AFN board. I really appreciate you taking time off for this, and just my respect for you has just increased for that. I was doing a subsistence presentation in Phoenix, and a lady came up to me after I was done, and she said, do you know that you're one of the very few places in the world that could probably live fossil fuel free? I never thought of that. If we are allowed to participate in management roles, I believe that will always be the case. One of the perfect examples of being excluded from management roles, as Yvonne has stated, the need to be inclusive, is we are excluded from the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. The Otton region, the Doyon region, the Chalice region, the Bering Straits region, the Nana region, and the Arctic Slope region, all are excluded from having a single member on the commission. Yet we have members from Washington and Oregon on that council. You know, to us that's a slap in the face. We do have Western intelligence. My tiny little village of 730 people has tribal members that are orthopedic surgeons, family practitioners, neurologists, physical therapists, and now a student going to a dental program. So we do have Western intelligence, and to me, if you can mix the Western intelligence and the traditional knowledge, that's a no-lose. That's a no-lose information base. So I urge the hope to be included into the management programs, not just in the federal level like in the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, but in the State Department too. But thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
If I talk real slow, could you give me double time? My name is Father Martin Nicola. I am from Queethuk, just outside of Bethel in the Kuskokwim. Subsistence, when they translate it into English, it's Nagamnaksarak. It means trying to eat. But Nagamnaksarak is under Yonaksarak. It means trying to live like a human being. And the word for my race is Yukbek, or further north is Nukbek, south is Sukbek. They all mean the same thing. Even the interior Athabascan people, I think they have the same meaning. Being Yukbek, being a human being, it's a way of life. Subsistence is a way of life we often hear, but we don't understand it. It means surviving life. I'm a Yukbek, and if I try to live like a human being, I'm Yukbek. I'm practicing Nimnuksa, trying to live like a human being. So if I don't eat, I know I die. That's what's the understanding of the elders who came before me. And there are certain foods that they truly enjoy and they eat and they're happy. Let me quick humorous story. A missionary comes to a village, a Yupik village, and teaches them about the church and everything. And then he says, there's a heaven and there's a hell. If you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell and suffer. And then an old man comes up to him and said, you mean if I'm good, I'll go to heaven? Yeah. Okay, says the old man. As long as I can set up my blackfish trap, I'll be happy. But that's the way of life. You know, you eat and you don't waste. Subsistence is practiced from birth, the day you are born, until the day you die. And we don't waste anything, or try not to, very hard. That's embedded into our minds. And that's where my plea is coming from, not to waste anything. So we'll be conserving salmon in the Kuskokwim this coming summer, and all we're asking is for the government to help us to conserve in the high seas also and not waste salmon that is supposed to come to our rivers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Amy Nusengenya. My ancestral roots are Yukon and Kaikuk River valleys. I was a subsistence fisherman on the Yukon River for many seasons. At this conference, we've heard testimony about the epidemic of suicide in our communities. And one thing that I want to bring out is the fact that Chinook salmon has the second highest content of vitamin D of anything in the world. The first being sockeye salmon. And vitamin D is proven to be essential for physical and mental well-being. People that suffer from seasonal affective disorder because of the many months of darkness are often treated with very high doses of vitamin D. But our people in the villages and along the river systems are being deprived of this essential nutrient through the mismanagement of the fishery. And anytime that someone can sit down to dinner in Washington, D.C. and get Chinook salmon for dinner, and people can't go down to the river in front of their door and take out a fish to feed their family to ensure their well-being, then it's time for a change in the management. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mark. My name is Lucy Stark, and my roots are Chivak, Alaska. Everybody and everybody else, everybody ahead of me and everybody behind me will say what I want to say. But I would like for you to say, you heard somebody say, we are proud people. We want to live our life. We don't like to beg, but look at all of us. We're begging what we don't want to do. So I hope you take that and understand that. We don't want to beg, but we are. And I hope that in the future, something better will be given to us so that we don't have to beg anymore. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having this military tribunal. As you notice the flag, it's a military flag. So it is a military tribunal. And I want to thank you for all of the work that you have done in this center on behalf of Alaska's indigenous people. You've done a lot of good work and continue, because it does help us here. However, on the issue of our food security, it's imperative that the United States recognize our indigenous nations, our villages, our tribes, our nations. And for our, turn my back so that I can't see that thing. For our people, if we want to change, we can't ask Mark to change it. We have to look at our own communities and change it. We have to look at our own elders. And this young man that was up here was amazing. We have to write our own laws, assert our own authority, not as villages, not as tribes, but nations. The United States called every village in Alaska a tribe, only to get us to fight amongst ourselves over this little pot of money, wherever and whichever one it might be. These are our resources that are being taken from our lands. Alaska is under occupation, and it has been since 1867 by the United States, and since the 1700s by Russia. Russia didn't do what the United States has done to us. They tried, but we killed them. Today is a different day, and it is up to us to take matters into our own hands again, take responsibility, because that's something that we have not done yet. And when we stand up and take responsibility and quit asking the feds and the state of Alaska, can we do this, can we do that, and go do it. You're sovereign peoples. Act like it. Take it into your own hands. Assert your authority as sovereigns. If you don't, we're not going to exist. I turned a great-grandfather last month. I want my grandson, my great-grandson, to be able to live off the land as we do. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank the tribe here in Fairbanks for giving me a chance to voice my own opinion about my way of life. Thank you very much. My name is Earl Keenan. I come from Point of Alaska. Thank you, Mark, for the first time. You never said, what kind of trouble are you giving me? No, but that's good. But I'm following the same footsteps like your father and Lisa McCoskey, you know. My father was a commissioner when I came back from Vietnam. He had many hats. He was with the Nunez Commission, Walrus Commission, ICANN board member, and all this, you know. And he doesn't know how to read, but when he comes back from meetings, I read a lot to him, and I explain to him what it says, but I thank him for teaching me all this. You know, I've been speaking on offshore activity for so long, maybe you get tired of it, but right now we got new things that's coming through to our community at Point Hope. This river passage that's opening up is going to be creating a lot of problems. My people in Point Hope are beginning to see a lot of tour ships, a lot of activity going on. We never see that much ships before, you know. We don't want that, you know, because my community, we're part of an ecosystem in my community. We hunt bowhead whale during the spring. We fish during the summer. We hunt caribou during the fall. And all the other animals throughout. Every month seems like we have different diets for our table. Because all the migratory animals go through Point Hope. But right now we got a big problem. There's this cruise ships that are going to be going through the North Passage. We don't know if they're dumping their sewage and stuff like that and other things. Another thing that the state of Alaska really want to do is fracking. Fracking is something that we try to keep away from the NPRA because a lot of communities in the north depend on the caribou, and they depend on the migratory birds, and they love to see mosquito every summer. You know, we don't want no fracking happening in NPRA in the state land. Right now, my brothers and sisters are being arrested in Canada for protesting against fracking. So we don't want that to happen. And also, Governor Purnell is still trying to open up Anwar. But I made a song, you want to hear it? Arctic refuge, keep it wild, la 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 la. I'm first sing that song at Washington D.C. when we were down there to protect Anwar and help our brothers and sisters in Western nations that depends on the caribou. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I should say Senator Mark. Anyway, my name is Ivan Ivan. I'm the chief of Akiak Native Community, and all of the words that I was going to say are all said by very good orators. People presented them very well. But I just wanted to sum them up as it affects our community members in Akiak. And my comments are not to offend anyone, embarrass anyone, but to educate you on these issues. I'm sure you've heard a lot of them and understand. But right now, our people are suffering from suicide, especially our elders. Even they're asking these young people to bury them, not the elders burying these children. And that's some of the issues that we need tools to start addressing all these issues, like because of no jurisdiction, tribal jurisdiction here, we're not recognized by the state of Alaska. And we deal with alcoholism, drug abuse, violence, bad things happening. And hunting, fishing, remember last year in our community, our fishermen were cited and fined $500, $250 suspended. But that's a big, big statement to some of these young people that are trying to put food for their elders. That's a big statement. It's not very healthy. That's not a healthy environment to be in when you can't do anything to hunt and fish. So as food resources, salmon is important. All the caribou, moose, and their medicine to our well-being, good healthy food, good for the heart. Empower our tribal governments with legislation wherever possible. We're part of the solution. We're not bad. We're not going to be bad. In fact, we'll be empowered by tribal governments to take care of these, work on these issues. Like some young man stated, we'll save the federal government money while we're doing it for ourselves. We've done it for thousands of years. We can do it. But thank you for the opportunity, and it was fresh to hear your comments in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when our trails crossed. Thank you for those comments down there. And out here, you were very refreshing, just like your dad that my older brother worked with. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I don't want to waste any of your time. You look like a good student, you take good notes. And my last comment is this. They say, my children, if these don't make good grades, they're failures. They're taught how to fish, how to get moose by these professors that are walking around, and I'm getting near that, and taught how to live a good, fruitful life out there. The land and the waters are our economic development. That's our food. And any of their children that fail because they say they can't read, write, or what's that other one? Reading, writing, mathematics. If I try to rob my grandchildren, they're already smart. I mean, they know mathematics. They know what I'm going to do. They're already smart. I mean, all of our kids are that way. But thank you very much for this opportunity, and please put my comments on record, and we hope to see you out there. We've got to get you elected. That's the bottom line.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will make a note, if you saw all the people who were giving their testimony, the one young man, Nelson, I don't know if he's still here, but Nelson had his iPad. Everyone else had paper, but he was already way ahead of us, electronics, so it's very good. Please.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Elias Kelly. I'm from the community of Pilot Station. I represent the Pilot Station Traditional Council, and I'm here to talk with you about the MSA. When I first heard that you were going you were going through the state, or communities in the state, addressing the reauthorization of MSA, I wrote down that I want to be able to get somewhere where I could talk about it. When Stevens first participated and created the MSA, he initially addressed or made it so the communities that participate directly in the fisheries can benefit from the economically and within their region, within their communities. My community participates directly with the Bering Sea in any resources through trade here or participating out in the fisheries. But unfortunately, my community is not a member of the CDQ program because it does not meet that 50-mile radius where communities were eligible to participate. But the economic impacts have been, I'm sorry to say, astronomical in my community. The Yukon River is our main resource, and our salmon resources is a big local income for commercial fishermen. We've got over 54 commercial fishermen in our communities, and very many people who fish here know that commercial fishing is a family business, and we've got more. When I go out commercial fishing, I am a commercial fisherman on the Yukon River. I take my two sons or my daughter with me or my wife. So those are my helpers. But in reauthorization the MSA, I would like to include or request that you please include a proposal to include the villages of Pickus Point, St. Mary's, Pilot Station, Mountain Village, Marshall, and Russell Mission. Those are communities within that have direct ties to our commercial fisheries on the Yukon River. The CDQ program was not meant to be paid for the Yukon River systems or any river systems. So, like for example, our price of our fuel for gas is over $8.03 per gallon. And that has directly impacted our commercial fisheries for our people to be able to participate in these fisheries. And our heating fuel is about $7.62 compared to neighboring communities that participate in the CDQ program, where their fuel costs may be from $7.62 to less than $5 or less than $4. So, but thank you for.
Thank you very much. That's very good information. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Donald Stevens, and I'm from Stevens Village, and we welcome you to our interior. And also like to thank AFN for having the convention here in the interior. This is part of Native people, Native Alaska, and I'm totally subsistence. I mentioned I'm from Stevens Village, and from Stevens Village on up to the Canadian border, you'll find totally subsistence people in that area. And I just want to talk a little about fishing, commercial fishing. I don't know too much about commercial because we're totally subsistence. Last couple of years, there was no king salmon run. And with that, maybe a couple of years before that, or within that time period, the mesh size was reduced. Being that Steve Village, Yukon River Bridge on up, that's all subsistence area. You ain't gonna find no commercial up in that area. Being that we're talking about king salmon on the in Alaska, we're at the end. We're at the end of the fish run, and we're people that depend on it. Just the same as other rivers. The upper Tanana, we've got all the interior people that depend on subsistence. You ain't gonna find no commercial. If maybe very little, just little. So I really appreciate you being here. I had to get up here and talk because you seem like you treat the people good and sit down, and even though we've been here 3 hours and you're still here. And so that makes me feel that you're concerned and because you work for us. Also, that was a very good panel you got there, and they were really educated people, and that's good. That's good. They work for Native people and for the state-wise, and you too. So even though we're not the majority Native people, we don't have the vote. The commercial people have it, and you know that coming from the high seas all the way down, something has to be done. We've got to get that fish up here, and even all the way along the Cussaquin, there's a lot of subsistence people, and with the high price of gas, high price of food, it's just going to get tougher and tougher. Old people used to say that's what's going to happen, and we're seeing it. But we continue to push our young people with education and to keep them off of drugs and alcohol, and we continue to push that. We do that with our potlatches, we do that with our singing, traditional songs and stuff. So again, you make me welcome. I feel welcome to talk with you, like you come in my house and you say, hey, Don, what's your problem?
Thanks, we have a few more people. I will say, Don, to all of you too, that patience is an important virtue in life, and listening is very important. So thank you all for continuing, please.
I'm Edward Alexander. I'm the second chief of the Begich tribal government for Yukon. First, I want to encourage the senator to amend the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, Section 1604B. The United States has become a signatory to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People in the meanwhile. That law needs to be looked at through that lens and see that it violates the United States commitment to Indigenous peoples, to our First Nations, and to the community of nations around the world. It's against moral principle to deny anybody the right to hunt and fish, and any government that lacks that authority, in my view. So I'd encourage you to amend that. As Don, Chief Don was saying, Up in the upper Yukon, we've been dramatically impacted by the closure of fisheries, more so than any other region in the state of Alaska. Since 2008, we've been effectively told we can't fish. We have an entire generation of children growing up who don't know the smell of a fish cache, who don't know how to manage one. For 5 years, we've been patient, but our patience is at an end, Senator. ANILCA has been a failure. Magnuson-Stevens Act has been a failure. Our rights have been watered down and washed away in the stream of commercial money, and it's time for it to end. I was there 2008 when they closed us down for fishing. We went from 2 food boxes a month to 110 food boxes in our community, but that didn't get into the Anchorage Daily News Miner or Anchorage Daily Newspaper or the News Miner. Here we are 5 years later, and we're still dealing with these same impacts. It's time for it to end. There was a BLM, Eastern Interior Resource Management Plan. We requested and received government-to-government consultation on that Eastern Interior Resource Management Plan. It affects over 10 million acres in Alaska, a major deal. All of our community participated. Tribal leaders from around the region participated. None of our commentary was entered into the official record. None of our commentary was utilized for the purpose of coming to a preferred record on that deal. So basically, they came up with a preferred alternative, completely ignoring all of the testimony from the people in that area that was going to be affected by widespread mining, widespread oil and gas development. All of it was ignored. We are here to formally request that the senators support Alternative B on the Eastern Interior Resource Management Plan, as DCC has done, as the National Congress of American Indians has done, and as our tribe has done. And I also want to formally protest ANILCA and the lack of response from our federal managers here in Alaska to the rural subsistence preference. You know, again and again, the Commerce Department and the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council has thumbed their nose at ANILCA, which is a prior law to their Magnuson-Stevens. Why? It's time for these abuses to end. And I really sincerely hope that you're going to go back there and remember today and change ANCSA. The time of those afterborns, of me being called an afterborn, born after rights, is over. I hope you'll change it.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely.
Good afternoon, Senator. And I have to apologize to the, say I'm sorry to the elders and to my fellow Athabascans here, because it's against our tradition, our culture to brag about ourselves. So, but I want you to know that I'm speaking from experience. I sat on the Western Interior Regional Advisory Council for 12 years, so I know how the federal system works. But he stopped working for us as Native people. Even though we get to sit at the table and we get to have input on policy, it's still not working, because if it was working, all these people wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you. So those systems don't work. And that's the other thing that you have to look at, because you've seen me in Greenland and over in Copenhagen speaking to the Arctic Council on fish issues. Well, they refuse to talk about fish, as you well know, because they trust in the management of NOAA and the North Pacific Management Council. And those two systems are not working. So the Arctic Council, on an international level, really needs to start looking at fish. They talk about food security. Well, fish is what we eat. I eat fish every single day of my life because I live on a river. I know what the fish runs are doing on the river because I'm out there fishing every single summer. Just like my friend from the lower Yukon, John, over there, he knows. We don't come up here to talk to you because we feel sorry for ourselves or our people, because we're out there living it, we see it. We're breathing, we're out there, we're living the life. The other thing that I really, really want the government to look at is the reason why I wanted you to look at it from the Arctic Council standpoint is because
We have, everybody's always talking about salmon bycatch. Well, the bycatch levels are known on the American side. We know what the Americans are doing when it comes to pollock fishing. But do we know what the Chinese, the Japanese, do we know what they're doing? No, we don't know what they're doing because they don't count their bycatch. So there's a whole bunch of information out there that's missing from the bycatch because we don't get what the Russians are doing. And the Russians are not good fishermen, so they get the Chinese and the Japanese to fish for them. So you know, there's a whole block of information missing. And you always say, when you want to do something, you want to be prepared. Well, the only way we're going to be prepared is if we know what the Russians and the Chinese and the Japanese are doing out there in the Bering Sea. You know, we cannot continue to fight among ourselves. I cannot continue to fight with John over who's going to get the fish. I cannot continue to do that. Now we have a Yukon River Drainage Fishermen's Association. We try to work these issues, but yet, even though we have one collective voice, we're still having problems getting our message to you and to the greater nation out there. So we really need your help when it comes to putting our issues on an international level so we can really get all the information.
Thank you very much.
And again, I would like to, you know, hopefully someday you'll come to Nolado. I know this summer you went to Galena. Right. And remember what I told you before you went to Galena. I wanted you to go out there and look at the impacts of the flood, but also look at the impacts of the people who didn't get to fish or hunt this summer. Those people have to live there, but they didn't get the opportunity to fish. They got a little bit of opportunity to hunt, but they're going to be out there struggling even more.
Good point. Thank you. And as, just so you know, I took your advice, and not only did I see the flood of Galena, I went to a fish camp up the river and took the head of the Indian Affairs Committee. We were up there, and it was a very important experience to recognize that the fish they caught at that point was no more than 20% of what they needed for the whole winter. So it was a very important moment. So your advice was well taken. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert.
Hold on one second. I just want to add thanks. This is why I have great staff. Agatha reminded me that one other thing we did, especially the Galena region, because as you know, many were taking care of their flooded homes, that they were busy trying to take care of that incident and not out hunting or fishing, and it caused an impact. So we were able to get the federal officials to extend the hunting season for an additional week to make sure for moose, if I'm not mistaken, which was very important. And it was because of that impact. But again, it was important to go to Galena to hear the issues and then get some results. So go ahead, please.
My name is Robert. I'm from Barrow. I just recently got elected to the Nibet community of the Arctic Zone. Also, my background is in education. My educational training is in elementary education, and I received my master's in administration policy from McGill. So my heart is with education, but my wife is from Maine, but she always tells me to take your path. I have two boys. One is still in Maine. He recently got his master's in chemistry, and the other one is in Barrow, but he's working as a carpenter. But we have our first grandson from him, so he will be 2. So it's the first one is sporting a security. We recently got back from Maine. The reason we moved to Maine was for 2 boys to get a quality Yankee education, because they could not receive it here on the North Slope. And that purpose of education has long history. It started right before my time. So the history I'm going to try to use as to answer the solution, or to create solutions for it. In 1848, July 1848, there was Captain
raised started the first whales, bowhead whales on the Bering Sea. And from that time, they've been commercially whaling for 50 years. And that time had decimated almost to extinction of bowhead whales and the marine mammals that UPIP used for not only for food, nutrient celebration, that type of. And from there, Captain, one of the, or a few other commercial traders must have written to the Congress and ordered the commander to go check out what was going on. But he did make a report and recommended three schools be built on the shores of the island, and one was there. And 3 schools were established, but during that time, remember the history of the U.S. was just being going into industrial revolution. And that education has shadowed us to this day and time, because a lot of jobs are meant for utilitarian work. It's mostly for unlabeled or skilled or cheap labor source up to this day and time. Despite UPIP's natural intelligence is very spatial, and that with that spatial intelligence, UPIP are very good in map reading, Arctic science, math. They have potentials and capabilities for math engineering, but all those and the music are not addressed. So because of the purpose of education is for competency-based education. But what I'm trying to say is that from that time, the commercial whaling time, it has shadowed us, and the purpose of education has been for assimilation. And with that assimilation, it's either integration or incorporation. But the essence of that integration has been for the taking of the land, resources, and taking our rights away. And it has been very successfully. And the biggest obstacle is not only the competency-based education but also the coming back of the commercial whalers, not the oil, that has come back to haunt us. And I do have things when I look to you.
Please do that. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I have that. Yes, thank you. Oh, that's okay. Thank you. Please, good to see you.
Good to see you, Senator. I have to do this. I have to recognize the people that survived till today. I'm Billy Charles. I'm from Imama. My current job is collaborating with the University of Alaska in hope to maybe tackle some of the disparities that we see every day, the high rate of suicide, the high dropout rate, and so on, teenage pregnancy. We're finding, through this collaboration with the university and being out there in the field, working with our communities, we're finding subsistence is prevention, intervention. There has been a system, for centuries. A system where, before, the Western system, there was a system of, living together in harmony, respecting land, and like that. But we're identifying that as something that's going to help us, build character in myself, and maybe when they were young as well. Building the mind, and physically, and spiritually. Subsistence is very important. And the biggest food that we hear today is the salmon. I've also been on the CDQ program. Since the inception, I was there for the first 15 years, and I understand the importance of CDQ. reauthorization magnificent act is important to these small communities. These small communities were handed down, $100 to go attend and testify in maybe at the Fish and Wildlife Service or Alaska Department of Fish and Game. Limited resources. But now with this CDQ, it allows us to be real participants in the regulatory process. So the reauthorization, as is, if I can, we're always looking out for the benefits outside the CDQ region. And I think we've been successful in that. With that, Senator, I think I've tied the CBPR with the university, the current work that I'm doing right now, and the importance of food, the subsistence, and also the Magnuson Stevens Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Senator Begich. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm Roy Ashenfelter. I currently work at COARC. I've also been a AC member for over 20 years. Right there in northern Norton Sound, we've had a chum crash that occurred over 15 years ago. We've had the longest salmon crash in the state. Right now, the focus has been on Chinook. What happened when our crash occurred? We went to Tier 2 and 20 people were allowed to fish out of 200. They're allowed to catch 100 fish. We've had, since it's been so long, you look at the elders, that since they've had their nets taken away, not been able to fish, we've all passed them, not having an opportunity to share their experience and passing it on to the young people. If you look at conversely, you have 15-year-old children in our region, in northern Norton Sound, that haven't had the experience of subsistence fishing. We need, I've been going to Board of Fish meetings, asking them to reduce the interception of chum. I've gone to the council meetings all these years trying to ask them to reduce the bycatch of chum. To no avail. We haven't had the relief and changes necessary. The total conservation has been put on us. It is very striking that we're here today and the Chinook problem is paramount. We've had this problem for a long time. So I would offer that there be funding for research in our region, that there be an analysis of the 15 years that have gone on without a review by either Department of Fish and Game or the Council on the impacts for chum or lack of chum for our people in our region. It is very important that we do a review of what's been happening to us and to our local people there. And most importantly, what we want is an opportunity to go back and keep traditional fishing. I'll give you an example. This year, 2013, at the Board of Fish meeting, we had a proposal in there to allow seining in the river. Instead, the board turned it down. They supported rod and reel sport fishing. Where is the subsistence priority in that? We've had the river closed and only people allowed to fish using rod and reel as legal subsistence to your FML. There have been some changes, there have been some improvements, but we need people to come and sit down and figure out solutions. Not so much that I've gone to a couple of fishery meetings and I haven't seen them come back with results, funding, ideas to change, biological information, what is happening in the commercial industry that would help us get more fish and share the burden of conservation. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Very good points. Thanks. Next, please.
Hi, Mark. I'm Merlin Johnson with the Native Village of Unity, which is on the west coast of Alaska. As we all know, our winters are getting shorter, and because our state weather is changing, it's getting warmer and warmer, and our ocean is changing too, because the ice up north is melting and the ocean's getting warmer. And the people up north, like below Kotzebue, during our catching our king salmon, and we're like down in Union Creek, and the people on the Yukon, we're hardly catching any king salmon anymore, and we're not getting any chums anymore. Therefore, we have to depend on other fish for subsistence. And a lot of our people in our villages depend on fish. Our fishermen, that's all the jobs they have. So we have no kind of income for our villages, our fishermen. And it would be good if we could get some kind of support from the federal government for our natives.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for letting me pray this morning. It gave me strength. My name is Sarah James, and I'm from Arctic Village, Alaska. I'm Butch and I'm a chairperson to Butch Steering Committee. We have that position as a Butch Nation since 1988. There's 18 villages, US and Canada, and we're united as a Butch Nation on this issue. And elders give us direction to do it in a good way, and we have been. It was very hard for our elders to make this decision because they know it's going to bring people, but they have to. And at that time, nobody knows us. Nobody even knows what Gutchen was, who Gutchen is. Well, anyway, when they made that decision, they gave us a good way and stay united. And come back and meet every 2 years to renew a resolution. So that's that we've been doing. And we never received any money from the federal government or state government. We only went out to small private foundations and individual and whatever we can raise. We've been against the multi-million-dollar corporation, which is oil, which is mainly what it is in here. But with the people's power, you can make change. And we, as a nation, we can make change. We did make a lot of friends. And, you know, Creator gave us everything that we needed and gave us responsible for it. We're steward of that land. That's our responsibility. We have to do our part in order to be close to our creation or our God. And that's our responsibility. Creator put Gutchen where it is today to take care of that part of the world, and that's a responsibility. And that's what, and we have that power. We have that as indigenous people. They did that. He did that to the whole world. We just need to go home and use our power. And so, you know, we didn't come from Landbridge. We came from where Creator put us, and that's our responsibility. We're not going anywhere. We're here to stay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to add one more because it really helps me to understand a lot of times. The whole world was concerned about whale. Save the whale, save the whale. They left it up to the indigenous people. They still can use subsistence as subsistence. They've proven it. It came back in little numbers. It came healthy. Look at that. We already proved it. And then bald eagle.
it was endangered species, and we can't, but Native American can use it for spiritual reason, and they do, and they still do, and they dance with it. They came back. Who got the ability to do that? The indigenous people of that land, wherever the Creator put them. And we have that respect, and we need that respect. And that's the only way. Other than that, with the climate change and global warming, it's all of us. We tell our children, go hunt, go live in the village. We tell our children, go get your higher education. We're stuck in two worlds. But they're not perfect, we're not perfect. We have to put troops together and go forward to get this earth back and operating, because we are in trouble. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senator Mark Begich. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. And I really appreciate you being here for the people. But my main concern is subsistence. When it comes to subsistence, for many years, our ancestors lived on this land, and oh, by the way, I'm originally from Elam and White Mountain, but I live in Anchorage. My name is Caroline Nuglene, Nuglene, and I just wanted to express my concern regarding subsistence, that our ancestors were able to fish and hunt at any time, and then when this became a state, the people started making rules that Alaska Natives are only able to hunt and fish at a certain time. And then all of a sudden now that they're thinking about making a rule where they're going to only be able to do subsistence fishing in specific areas, which really doesn't make sense, because there's specific places where the Native people have been subsistence fishing all the time, and of course the price of gas, in the villages are really expensive, as well as the cost of other things. And then if the fish or when they go hunting is not available, what other resources do they have available? And I think it should be a priority for subsistence hunting and fishing to be a priority, and then commercial fishing and hunting, as well as sports fishing and hunting. And because if the resources are unavailable in a specific time or a specific area, what options do we have? Are we going to be able to sign up for food stamps, all of us, so you could, for the amount of fish that they sell on the market, or is that resource going to be available for us to fill up our freezer? Could you imagine the price of fish if you bought it by the pound? What is it, $16.99 a pound? I want to fill my freezer and I want to have enough to feed my dogs. Can you give me thousands of dollars in assistance? But that's what I just wanted to explain my concern. But thank you again for being here for the people.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony, please. 4 left here, so thank you all very much. Thanks for being patient as we work through it, and appreciate it. Thanks.
Is it good afternoon or good evening?
I have lost track. It's in between, I think. It's a room with no window, so we have no idea what's happening.
Well, thanks, Senator, for staying here so long and listening to all we have to say. My name is Louis Green. I wear many hats in my community, and some of them are as a director of Sitnasauk Native Village Corporation. I've been there several years. I'm also on the regional board for Fairbanks Basin Regional. I have currently served as a RAC chair for the Seward Peninsula. Here I'm standing before you right now because I'm speaking for the people that can't be here, that talk to me on the street. you know, and bring their concerns to me. So what I thought I'd talk on is, you know, you're talking about food security. Well, at one point in time in my life, I could walk up and down the beaches in Nome, and I could find floats, glass floats, bamboo poles, you know, web, all kinds of sorts of things from Asian fisheries taking place just over the horizon. I was fortunate enough to represent my school in 1975 at Boise State, where Ted Stevens came to speak to us about the 200-mile limit. And, you know, we were happy that that was taking place because, hey, you're going to stop the intercept of fisheries out there. We're, at that time, realizing that we're losing our sockeye runs up there. We have the most northwestern sockeye runs. So we're losing our runs. The king runs are depleting in our waters in the Nome area. So we were happy to see that was going on. The federal government was stepping in and doing something on our behalf. Well, as time goes by, up to, you know, back in the mid to late 70s, we start losing our salmon runs. My father noticed this. One of the game biologists noticed this. Carl DeVogel spoke about it, you know, spent a lot of time out in the field. So we realized that there was a problem heading our way. You know, our salmon stocks just started slipping away. Chum salmon, then everything else behind it followed. You've got, then in the early 90s, we formed CDQ, Community Development Quotas. They have their positive points, and I don't want to take that away from them, but you also have a group of people in my area that control a lot of money that could do more for economic development, otherwise just besides fishing. There could also be monies funding to private enterprise to enhance our salmon runs. No one needs that kind of help. We need that assistance. So essentially, like I've seen in the Alaska Dispatch, you have villages versus villages. You've got the government putting into effect a government program, but it's like divide and conquer. We have our people are fighting each other. Some of them are in favor and some of them aren't. People want salmon, people don't want pollock. 12,200 years ago, I don't think they were eating pollock, and I don't think anybody ever dried one in all that time. So with that, I appreciate your patience.
No, thank you very much. Your point is well taken.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
William Silas, Eagle Road, just to voice an opinion. American History 101. There are 3 G's: gold, glory, and gospel. One more letter: greed.
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm a political scientist. What has happened throughout history is that nobody knows this history of Alaska is a complete fraud. I would like to refer to you to the Political Science Quarterly 1948 September issue. The Russian occupation that the United States, the Russians did not receive $7.2 million as it's been alleged in false history. The Russians only had 144,000 cubic feet of land, which they paid the Russians $5 million for. So the purchase of Alaska has been a complete fraud since the time of Seward. And the Political Science Quarterly covers this very thoroughly. The purchase that Russia bought is not the rest of the territorial occupation since time immemorial. So you have been led with false history for all of these years that the United States gave the Russians 7.2 million acres. So this is complete fraud. And so and it's been verified by the scholars itself from Seward on down. The $7.4 million
Only $2.4 million was to pay for the political fraud that President Johnson paid for. So I want you to get wise and smarter and read the citation that I've just given you.
Thank you very much. You're the last person. Thank you very much for your patience and being in line there.
No problem. I remember your dad when you was a little kid in school.
Thank you.
And I'm kind of glad to see you're just about starting to do the kind of work he used to do.
Thank you.
My name is George Edwardson. I'm a councilman for the 85th community of the Arctic Slope. And that's north of the Arctic Circle. 8 communities, and the government calls us tribes, call each of our villages separate native tribes. They're not. Those are my family. 84 out of every 100 in those communities are my relatives by blood. And food security, you wanted us to talk about food security. I have a community that just finished pulling all their nets out of the river from the largest river in the north, the Colville River. The river is now filling up with dead fish. Contaminated, the state of Alaska knows the contaminant. They've already analyzed it, and it's coming from the drilling that had happened in the past and the present drilling. The dump that was identified last year is totally gone, and it's all in the river. I have an uncle, his whole family was poisoned by eating a fish from that river. And there is a very serious problem. The largest freshwater flowing north of the Arctic Circle, over 65% of the freshwater coming out of the Arctic is now contaminated. For over 10 years, I've been trying to get the United States to clean Umiak with the legacy well dump, because transformers were starting to come out, and when they done their cleanup, they pulled out a little over 30 transformers. There was 268 that went to the dump. They are in the river, and they are flowing, and now the dead fish is arriving in North. Just this week, they finished pulling all their nets out, because nothing but dead fish, all the fish. I mean, the United States knows about this. I've been saying it ever since the RAB started, that, and we have a very serious problem. That's just one community. Another community, all the way to the west, Point Hope. The Atomic Energy Commission left 6 nuclear bombs in the ground. 2 years ago, I had a meeting paid for by Department of Energy, and the Pentagon sent a colonel to the meeting. And finally, toward the end of the day, he admitted they left the bombs in the holes they put in the ground, 1,200 feet under. And then when I told him, what's going to happen if some crazy group finds out you left them? Without thinking, he answered, they're too heavy, they can't pull them out. And then when he said that, all of us looked at him with our mouths open. These were the directors out of all the other federal agencies that were at that meeting. And she gives me time out. Can I finish? I'm the last one.
Well, actually, now there's someone right behind you.
Okay. And today is 2 years now. Nothing has been done. And then the way I found out about the bombs, I used the Freedom of Information Act on Bill Clinton when he was president, and he gave me the telex that showed the devices coming north. Everybody that worked there have died of cancer. The community's cancer rate is very high. Those 2 communities. Now, my final one, offshore. remember the seismic shell and the others did out straight out for Wainwright? While they were doing their seismic off of Banks Island in Canada, almost 500 miles away, they had to turn off their seismic machines because the background noise from Wainwright was too loud. That's 500 miles, and the instruments are not working because, you know, the seismic being done on the truck G was too loud. And then we keep hearing the people here talk about their missing fish. Here's where their fish are. While they were doing their seismic, they were checking the middle of the ocean, top of the ocean, and the bottom. And you know what they found? Salmon fingerlings starting from Point Barrow, going 200 miles out, going west till it was 168 miles past Randall Island, going 200 miles out. That whole water there was filled with salmon fingerlings, and I've got this documented by what your government calls marine mammal observers. I had them taking pictures, and that's what we found. The missing salmon, your missing salmon has been herded into my rivers by the seismic. I could continue all night like this on what happened, but he told me I was time out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I appreciate it. There's one more. I'm going to take it. You're going to be the last one, only because one, we've gone over. Two, I've been sitting here and I've drinking a lot of water. Nature calls in many ways.
Senator Art Havenock from Unifleet. I serve as the chairman of Southern Arkansas Fishing Game Advisory Committee. And something new, the convention just adopted the resolution 06 calling for tribal representation. And I think it's really imperative that tribes are given an opportunity to engage and to participate in this process. I think there's a real need for inclusion. I've echoed that repeatedly.
Absolutely.
Just looking at the 8 regional councils, we see New England has 18 council members. Mid-Atlantic has 21 council members. In Alaska, we have 11. 6 is composed of Alaska residents, 5 from Washington and Oregon. We heard Melanie Banky provide testimony earlier today, and I think it was pretty compelling. You know, it's like we're at the back of the bus, and I think there's a need for more than one representative to serve on the council. We need diversity. I've always suggested we need backup to apply to this process, just so that we get different opinions. But again, I want to stress the need for multiple users from different organizations. So thank you again, Senator.
Thank you. Mary, thank you. I know you've come to many of my listening sessions, been very helpful in putting information on the table, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I think you're the last one.
Thank you, Senator Begich. My name is Sam Jackson. I'm the Vice Chief for the Akak Native Community. I'd like to speak on behalf of the proposed demonstration projects of the inter-tribal fisheries that is proposed for both the Yukon and the Kuskokwim. I'm the first of about 30 grandchildren of my grandparents.
Oh, man, let's see that mic. That mic just might have, tap that mic, just go like this, see. Battery, see how, battery might have died, so hang on a second. Can you speak loud? Okay. See if we can disconnect, grab one of those. Be loud.
Yeah,
loud and strong.
Like I was saying, I'm the oldest grandchild of about 30 grandchildren of my late grandparents. My grandfather was half blind when I was growing up, so I had to start fishing when I was quite young. Of all these years I've been fishing, I've noticed numbers of our Chinook going voice out and have spoken in support of the original Aboriginal people of this land be at the table when our resources are being discussed. We have so-called biologists both on the federal and state side that are so-called experts because they went to 4 years of school, in college. I've been on the river for nearly 50 years. I have 15 grandchildren of my own. And I'm still learning on how to fish these rivers. So it doesn't make sense to me when you go to school for 4 years and you come and tell me and my people that we have no more fish. We watch the Yukon, the management of the Yukon River, and it's very sad. I live on the customs. I don't want to see that on the customs. I want our tribes to be on the same page as you, as those 4-year college graduates, so we can decide our own fate. I don't think it's right for somebody to come into my house and tell me how to live. And I don't think you'd like that either. I know you need to go do your thing, so.
Thank you. Let me say this. You know that we take a lot of testimony when the battery runs out of the microphone. That's a good sign. But first, let me say to all the folks that have testified, the ones that aren't here now, but we appreciate the record. We'll reflect the comments as well as the panel, and we will keep the record open to the end of the month for other people who might be sending us stuff and submitting written records. But also I want to say that it's greatly appreciated. This is helpful. This helps us build the history and the record of, as we move forward with some of these issues after 20 plus years of management, federal management of subsistence, and what we need to do to improve it or change it. And this is very helpful. On MSA, I want to make it very clear here, one common thread that has come up, and Art, you really made the point again here, by all groups, is the lack of recognition in the Magnuson-Stevens Act of subsistence and the impact and what it should be. And that's something that's very common thread that I've picked up throughout all my sessions that I've had throughout the state, is a better recognition and a better understanding of how it should be treated within. Because when you manage commercial fishing, that's different than subsistence. Subsistence is different than sports fishing. And I really appreciate these listening sessions. I told my team when I wanted to do one here on Magnuson-Stevens Act, they said, well, it's going to be a long line of testimony, and that was okay. Because part of this is to make sure people are at the table before a piece of legislation is drafted, so you have input before. So many times I've heard over and over again, while we see legislation, we never were asked to give any input prior to it. The way we operate is we want to get input and then reflect in that legislation what people have said or their comments. May not be 100%, but the idea is to ensure that's part of the equation. So first, thank you very much for that. Bill, I just noticed you again. I introduced you. You had walked out of the room right when I introduced you earlier in the room early on when it was full up here. But Bill Walker, thank you for being here. I know you spent the last couple of days at the convention, and I know this issue is important to you and what you're talking about. So thank you for being here. Again, to all of you, appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me being patient here, but nature does call. Thank you all very much.